It's time for Windows Weekly. I'm back, baby. Richard Campbell's here. Paul Thurrott is here. We've got Microsoft's earnings. They'll give us their analysis. The UK government says, to Microsoft. And what does that new update preview mean? We'll find out that and more next on Windows Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell, episode 826, recorded Wednesday, April 26th, 2023. Make it Suntory time. Windows Weekly is brought to you by ACI Learning. If you love IT Pro, you will love ACI Learning. ACI Learning offers fully customizable training for your team in formats for every kind of learner across audit, cybersecurity, and IT. From entry-level training to putting people on the moon, ACI Learning has you covered. Visit go.acilearning.com/twit to learn more. And by Lookout, whether on a device or in the cloud, your business data is always on the move. Minimize risk, increase visibility, and ensure compliance with Lookout's unified platform. Visit lookout.com today. And by Collide. Collide is a device trust solution that ensures that if a device isn't secure, it can't access your apps. It's zero trust for Okta. Visit KOLIDE, collide.com/WW and book a demo today. It's time for Windows Weekly. Hey, everybody, I'm back. Sorry. Thank you to Micah for doing such a yeoman's job. That's actually not a good thing, is it? Is a yeoman better than a journeyman? He did a good job.
Yeah, he did a great job.
Yeah, really good. But I am back, I'm sorry to say, and good news, so are Richard Campbell from Run As Radio and .NET Rocks, and Mr. Paul Thurrott, Thurrott.com and leanpub.com. Hello, gents. Did I miss anything while I was gone?
It's been madness, nonstop.
You missed the second half of Richard's whiskey lecture.
Yeah, the long parts. Yeah. I think I referred to the Gartner hype cycle every show.
That's right.
I was told that this class would be a seminar, not a lecture. I'm a little disappointed. Yeah. Well, this time we're going to do Japanese whiskey, so I'm excited about that because I'm very curious. It has a good reputation, and of course, Bill Murray drinks it, so I will be very curious to learn more about that. But first, a word. We have to do a show to keep the ads from happening all at once. That's all I'm saying. So let's. There were some big actually. I did not miss the big stories. This has been a very, very big day. Whence would you like to begin?
Well, I think we'll start with the biggest story of all, and
the UK. Blocking.
Already just acquired over 100 classic games.
Never mind.
No.
Actually, I'm excited about that, but we'll save that for later.
Yeah, I am too. No, I mean, I think. Well, I mean, I threw it in the back. I actually meant to talk to somebody.
I don't have your notes up yet. That's why I made you do this, but I'm pulling them up right now. So
I stuck this the UK story back with the Xbox stuff, but maybe we should.
I think it's a pretty big story, don't you?
There have been a lot of what I'll call WTF moments in this process.
And I got to say,
this is definitely the biggest one. And the reason is every indication was that the UK was going to just greenlight this acquisition.
They already said yes.
That's what makes sense. Yep. No one has ever. So of all the issues that Sony has ever raised, nobody has ever really raised the specter of cloud streaming, right? It's always been Call of Duty. Then Microsoft has said, hey, guys, it's not about Call of Duty. It's about mobile gaming, mobile gaming. And then the UK said, nope, it's about cloud streaming, this market that doesn't even exist. But we're worried about it because, that market leader, who's not from the UK, by the way, doesn't have a cloud gaming kind of solution yet. So why don't we just see what the
worst thing was their tweet. In which they announced this. The UK CMA, Competition and Markets Authority, had a PlayStation reversed, but still clearly identifiable PlayStation controller in it. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I get it. Okay.
I don't. I don't. I'm just confused by it. It's like walking around the corner getting hit in the face with a 2x4. You just don't see it coming. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
So what happened initially was they said there was plenty of competition in the console market. So no problem.
Nowhere's there.
But then they somehow decided that, the cloud gaming market is its entirely different market, unrelated. And in that case, Microsoft is a leader, a dominant leader.
A dominant leader. A
because Sony got out of the business. Sony had Gaikai. Sony had.
Okay, just listen. Because I write about Microsoft, it's an unhappy truth that the term antitrust comes up a lot. I've had to research this. I look into it a lot. I understand what the differences are between different jurisdictions and whatnot. And I got to tell you, one of the foundational truths of antitrust, when it comes to monopolies and market power and abuse, is that there has to be a market to be impacted for this thing to even be a discussion.
Yeah.
There is no market for cloud gaming right now. It's nothing. It's the tiniest thing in the world. And I'll just tell you from kind of a practical standpoint, having actually used it, unlike apparently any regulator from the UK, that it's not going to replace consoles anytime soon, if ever. And the reason is, it's not like, in other words, like we go from one thing to another in a lot of markets. The truth is gaming has just expanded to include lots of device types. The biggest part of the gaming market is mobile, casual games, things that I don't care about personally. That's the big stuff. Wordle has a more of a monopoly than Microsoft does, So, right? I mean, there's more people playing Wordle ever. I'm just saying.
And then you get into the whole Sherman Act and say, and it has to be doing harm to consumers.
Well, but this is the UK, and so I don't know what their rules are. But
you could look at it from the right. Yeah, the UK, the Florida of Europe has decided that
that's harsh.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's really harsh. I don't know.
I'm sorry. So. Yeah, no,
you don't really hear them say UK man, glues himself to the toilet.
Give him some time there,
Okay, all right.
We'll say. So, look, I guess whether you're trying to protect competition, which is what is typically the case in Europe anyway, or if you're trying to protect consumers, which is typically the case antitrust in the United States, there is no harm here. Like there is nothing to protect. This market is wide open. If you were going to make a bet on the future, you could make a good case for Sony, the dominant company of consoles, having a pretty big play in cloud streaming. You could also make a pretty big case that a company like Google, which failed, could do a pretty good job of this because they have the cloud computing part of it. Microsoft does too. Amazon does too. Help me again, but is Amazon Luna dominating anything right now? No. A company like Apple or again, Google that has a big mobile play could have some kind of an impact in this market. Nobody knows. This is all speculation because this market doesn't really exist. It's not important. So I don't mind. There are arguments to be made about things that are true. Microsoft does do this. I don't like arguments that are like Microsoft might do something, right? Or this market might turn into something. Yeah, it might, but we all have ideas. I mean, there's no guarantee in a market this nascent that anything is going to happen. That is a silly reason to deny this acquisition. There are reasons to argue this point, right? There's a debate to be had, absolutely. Not with this, not this part.
Well, and they're basically saying like the only remedy is not to merge. That we would have to regulate otherwise.
Wow.
They're not even leaving the core. They're not even really leaving room for negotiation.
Well, the funny
part
about
they stop
that,
this? Can they do it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, unless you don't want to do business in the UK, right? Yeah. I mean, that would be the
right way to do it. Say, hey, you don't want Call of Duty, you don't need Call of Duty.
Yes. So, if we go back in time about 20 years, this was the argument that a lot of Microsoft enthusiasts were making about the EU. Screw these guys. If they can't figure it out, we just don't sell stuff in the EU. What? This is like one of the biggest markets in the world. But unfortunately, for the UK, They decided being part of that market was dumb, and they just drifted off on their own like an island. And
Weird.
now they're their own thing. And honestly, could you make a case for like, all right, we just won't do business there? I mean,
yeah, but what if they said, if you don't give us Call of Duty, we may give you any whiskey?
Yeah, sure.
That could be problematic.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's
no, they don't have a lot of leverage in this. I think.
No, they really don't.
Saying.
It does, but you know what? I don't even want to get into that. That's not.
They wouldn't. Microsoft.
I don't think it's not
that.
good business to exclude a market.
Yeah, but this is such a big deal. And if it's only the UK, well, we'll have to wait and see what the US does. But it's the only UK that blocks it. What do? Do you say, okay, never mind?
The EU hasn't finalized either. Right. But if the EU falls in and says, okay,
that's different. Like, yeah.
I mean, I almost wonder if the UK is just taking a flyer here to see if anybody's going to join them.
But the argument doesn't make any sense. In other words, like, you know, the complaint I had about the arguments we've seen so far from the United States, especially, but also from the EU, has been, you're taking Sony's stance. I don't understand why you're backing this company. You're just taking their side. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like I said, I think there's a debate to be had for sure. And I think there are we talked about this, very logical things Microsoft can do to answer any antitrust concerns around guarantees, around providing games and rival platforms, et cetera, et cetera. Every one of those applies to this imagined world in which cloud gaming or cloud streaming, or whatever you want to call it, becomes some major market. You just ensure that the same guarantees exist. We will release Call of Duty on the Sony PlayStation of whatever stripe for the next 10 years. And anything that Sony releases as kind of if we put it on Xbox Game Pass or cloud gaming, we will put it on whatever Sony's cloud gaming thing is called. We'll do that. And you know, Microsoft would agree to that right now.
But that doesn't sound like the UK is allowing for that. It sounds like.
Okay. Well, that's
they're saying, this is just the way it is. It's either you can't do it. Now, by the way, I should point out, didn't the EU already give it a green light? I think it did. So we're waiting on the US, the FTC.
No, the EU has not.
Oh, I thought they did.
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that would be a thing you could do.
But look, if some regulatory body was to make a good argument about this and get some good concession out of Microsoft, you would expect others to look at that and say, hey, you know what, this makes sense. We're going to do this here as well. What the UK just announced doesn't make sense. No one is going to look at that and say, maybe they're onto something. You know, maybe they have a Minority Report machine and they know what's the future crimes that Microsoft's going to commit. And we should stop that before it happens. We'll send Tom Cruise in.
Well, their concern was there might be need for additional regulation. I'm like, aren't you bureaucrats? Isn't that what you do for a living? Why would you be avoiding that?
Right. It's just if they had come out and said, look, we're really concerned about Call of Duty and we don't think that what Microsoft conceded was enough, I would completely disagree, but at least it wouldn't have come out of left field.
Yeah. Actually, and it's negotiable, right? You lead with a negotiation.
This was like, we're almost 18 months into this, right? So, 15 months-ish, I think we have made the same complaint again and again and again and again and again and again. And now here's the decision. Oh, it's something else we've never discussed.
Right.
Wait, what? This is how my mother used to argue. What is this? This is crazy.
Well, it smacks of bad faith, right? Like that's really what it is when it's like, oh, Lisa, we lost that argument, so I'll make a new one.
Yeah, Lisa calls it retrading.
Yes.
Or relitigating. And it's really a bad form, frankly, to do that.
Yep.
You want to retrade the deal. You've already made a deal.
Yep.
But all right, let's it's kind of my job to raise straw men here.
Sure.
What if let's say UK's presumption, which is that the cloud gaming market is a separate market, and they clearly think that, then it does make sense, right? Because Microsoft, as small as that market is, blah blah blah, does dominate it, doesn't it?
No,
Wordle does.
No, they don't.
It's the Wordle that they should go after.
Yeah,
but is Wordle cloud gaming? I guess it is.
No, it isn't. I'm sorry. My Wordle joke was that Wordle is a casual game that's typically played on mobile. It's
but you're
part
still
of a much
playing
bigger
in the
market.
Cloud. What is cloud gaming?
Cloud gaming is cloud streaming. right? So in other words, you have a controller, and maybe you're connected to a smart TV, or you could be a PC.
They're not talking about internet gaming particularly, but this idea of a console in the cloud.
Yeah.
So if Microsoft's dominant there, aren't they? Who else is dominant?
No, but
NVIDIA.
It doesn't matter if they're dominant there. This is I'm trying to imagine, like, what is dominant?
Nobody is.
This is who's dominant in VHS players today,
right?
Right? Like, what are we talking about?
But I'm just saying the UK regulator clearly thinks that cloud gaming is a market, a nascent market, and wants to protect it for competition.
I don't know what to tell you. There are established players in gaming. I actually just named all of them, but it's, Apple, Google, Tencent, Microsoft,
but cloud gaming,
and Nintendo.
What you just described, consoles in the cloud.
I am describing right now all of the big players, the top 5 or 6 gaming companies in the world, right?
Yeah.
So these are the guys who have the market power, the cash, the resources to enter new markets where gaming might go, right? What's interesting is, and I don't want to go through this whole list, but it's bizarre to me that most of these companies have kind of stayed in their lane, right? Sony and Nintendo both do, and Microsoft actually, do not have big plays in mobile. Nintendo has released a handful of popular mobile games, but they're like, no, I think we're done. They have never gone back and said, hey, we have this rich library of NES and SNES and N64, whatever games from a million years ago that would play beautifully on iPhones and iPads and stuff. They've never even entertained the idea of entering this market for some reason, even though it would bring them untold billions. Like, it would be the simplest thing in the world. They've never done it. Sony has, like Microsoft, has gotten into game services that are kind of not streaming, but cloud-based, right? Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation Now, where you have a library in the cloud.
Well, that's like Steam.
To your device.
I mean,
yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, I mean, Steam is the dominant, but that's not cloud gaming, right?
Steam's not a subscription service,
right?
Where you get a library of games.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay,
right?
So
they're not a
so criterion number 1 is you got to be a subscription service.
No. I'm just describing what these people are doing. What I'm saying is what they're upset about is something that doesn't actually exist. What the market they're concerned about is what used to be Stadia, what is Amazon Luna, what is Xbox Cloud Gaming, which is a perk of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate only, which is $15 a month, by the way. It's not inexpensive. So does Microsoft dominate that market? And this is what others do. GeForce Now, there are other services, right? I mean, there's others, but those are the kind of the big ones, right? So I mean, I don't know. I mean, do we stop Ford from getting to EVs because they make traditional cars? And what if they dominate that market? Do we, do you like, do you stop?
I understand. No, I completely agree with, don't think I don't agree with your argument, because damn it, I do.
It just doesn't make sense.
But I'm just trying to put myself in the mindset of the UK regulator that clearly said we can, because this is what the whole thing happened was. At first they said, oh, it's not a problem. And then they said, well, but if we separate cloud gaming out, it is. And that's where that's what they're doing.
The problem I have with this is, I was talking to Richard about this before the show. Like, there's no scenario where cloud streaming, gaming over like a cloud stream game, takes over for any of these markets that exist today, right? So the big markets today for gaming are mobile/casual.
That's always going to be dominant. I agree with you.
PC and console, right?
You know what I'd point out? Boosteroid, which is one of the few like independent cloud streaming small UK company.
I never heard of them. Oh, they're protecting Boosteroid.
Oh, and by the way, Boosteroid came out today and said we completely disagree with this decision and we support Microsoft's acquisition.
No, really? Did they?
Yeah, really. They really did.
Love it.
Yeah, they completely disagree with this. It's not like,
just out of curiosity, does Boosteroid call
of.
itself Preparation B?
It's not like they ever went to the government of the country they live in and said, "Hey, could you protect us against this belligerent monopolist?"
Sony asked for it. Yeah, Sony asked for it. We know that, right? Otherwise,
look, my point is only this: Apple, Amazon, Google, Tencent, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, all have the ability to compete in this market if they want. Most companies are not. And having actually used these services, like I said, unlike most of these people probably, I can tell you We're not ready. This is not taking over. This is not replacing something.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, Microsoft's like, hey, we lost in console. We need to dominate in another market so we can, not worry about that. That market is not cloud gaming. That market is mobile. And they're never going to dominate that market. They're just going to be competitive in it. So in the same way that Windows used to dominate personal computing and is now just a small, not the biggest platform, let's put it that way. Microsoft today is a much bigger company than it ever was, and they're very, very successful, and everything's fine. Microsoft is never going to dominate mobile gaming. They're never going to dominate a market that is big and powerful that is called cloud gaming. That's not going to exist. It's just a perk of this other stuff.
Yeah.
It's just another way
but they are well positioned with their Game Pass to ultimately create a subscription model for all games.
That's what I thought.
This gobble up of all of these gaming studios, to me, it always seems like they're trying to fill out Game Pass as wide as they can get it while there's companies to buy.
Yeah. So, but if we, if we understand the history here, the one other reality we need to just remember is that this was Sony's strategy for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And Microsoft ignored this. Microsoft got rid of game studios, right? It wasn't until fairly recently, and yes, maybe to this shift of like, how can we make Xbox make sense within the context of the new Microsoft under Satya Nadella and cloud computing? We could do this other thing, that they started buying up game studios. So this is really Microsoft responding in many ways to Sony, and to a company that has dominated this market for the past, 20 years, whatever it's been. So yeah, Microsoft's a big company. They can afford to buy game studios. So can Sony, by the way, and they have. And we don't have to go down and relitigate the whole thing about exclusive games and blah blah blah. I think everyone understands the issue, but this cloud thing, what are we talking about?
It's a left field move.
Yeah, that's crazy. Does Microsoft have the best cloud gaming service? I mean,
only if you don't necessarily understand what cloud gaming is.
Right. I mean, the one thing you can't do on cloud, at least I can't, is, play a third-person shooter with great graphics, especially multiplayer. It's just the latency, the lag, whatever you want to call that. It's just
and that's
great.
got nothing to do with cloud. That's got everything to do with internet. Like, welcome to reality. The speed of light is a tough rule to beat.
Right, which is the defining feature of this type of service. It's not, look, people play games on phones because everyone has phones. It's convenient. They could be standing in line at a supermarket, tapping away on some Jewel game or whatever. It's no problem. For someone to spend the money it costs to do a cloud streaming game thing, and then be in a place and using a device where this even makes any sense at all requires effort and money. And that's not what these people are doing.
So Microsoft says it's going to appeal, but I don't know to whom you appeal. The Queen? I'm sorry, the King?
Right.
To whom does one appeal?
I would like to appeal to common sense.
That's a good one. I don't know if common sense can overrule. In fact, my experience is it does not overrule governments. So this is,
I'm sure they can work their way through the UK court system.
It's got to go to court. Yeah. I guess
there'll be plenty of white powdered wigs and things. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Sure.
Solicitors.
John Cleese could be in an ad.
That's it.
All
right. Well, I'm sorry to upend your orderly progression.
No. Actually, I meant to discuss the placement of that one story because I felt like maybe that should have been the top story.
I think for a lot of us, it's like it's a big story because it's like, what the hell, and what does it mean? I mean, how do you go forward after this?
Right. I mean, a lot of people on Twitter or whatever, like, oh, Paul's going to be really out of his gourd on Windows Weekly today, and it's like. Anyone who knows anything about anything should be confused by this. This is not,
everybody should be
me overreacting to something. This is this doesn't make any sense.
So we were waiting. I mean, in May, I guess the U.S. administrative judge will decide, and I think they will probably follow all those other countries who have said, that deal that you made to get rid of this and that.
Right.
And, that was
by
enough.
the way, the one interesting thing, I think this is a fact, is about all of the countries that have approved this deal, I believe this is true. I don't think any of them have required a single concession.
Right.
The countries that have said okay, and there are several, have all said without condition.
Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Chile, Serbia, Japan, which is probably the one that really matters here.
Mhm.
South Africa.
And it's funny.
Yeah, isn't that ironic?
Sony's home country is like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
What is going?
The EU
Guys,
will make its decision May 22nd, although the reason I thought they'd already decided, Reuters said last month that it was likely to be approved.
Yeah. Well, they said the same thing about the UK,
Yeah.
right? The
Who
UK was
knows?
likely to be approved.
And
those
maybe
guys had
that's what's
apparently-
going on is the UK is saying, like, as you said, let's see who else will go along with this. And
Did
we're
they
still
put money
waiting here.
down on like a Vegas bet or something? Like they were trying to screw with the results?
Watch
You know?
this. Watch this. And then I was wrong. I think it's August that the administrative judge takes it up in the U.S. I mean,
Well-
are we rooting for this deal to go through? Like, is this a good thing? I know Microsoft is, but
You know what? Let me. I want to be clear about this because I think a lot of people just assume like rooting. It's a good word. Like we're cheerleaders or something. No, I don't.
It doesn't matter if it goes through.
I don't
right?
care. I don't mean to say I don't care. I do play Call of Duty. It's going to impact me in some way. My point is only I just don't see any valid reason to try to block
I
this
agree.
deal.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
It's not an emotional thing. I just look at it logically, and I'm like, I just don't.
It's not the end of the world if it doesn't go through. For Microsoft, maybe, but not.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't. That's not going to change my life at
It's
all.
not as bad
but
as like Mad Dog hot dogs going out of business. It's not that. It's not at
how
that
do you know
level.
about that? That is the worst thing that has ever happened to me. So, I'm the kiss of death for restaurants. This is always happens to me. Every time I fall in love with a place, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're retiring." Like every time. How do you know about this? Does this come up somewhere?
Instagram.
It's like that.
You keep posting. So I have to say I share your passion for hot dogs,
God,
which
these are
is, by the way,
fantastic hot dogs.
the next best thing to slow suicide. But I notice every time you post a hot dog,
I see.
and then I saw, maybe it wasn't you, but somebody.
Is there a picture you can bring up of the hot dog? Because
It's a pretty good looking hot dog.
I got to tell
Unless
you,
you're a purist, I'm kind of, sometimes I go, I just
No, but
want
listen.
mustard and relish. I don't.
No, I hear you, but this is better. This hot dog is so fresh it almost feels like health food.
Now, here's the real. Yeah, good one, Paul. It almost convinced me. Every time I have a hot dog, Lisa says, that's going to cut your lifespan by half an hour.
I would say so is all the complaining.
See, I
Then
need
I'd
your
be
wit.
sleeping
I
on
need
the
your wit. Oh, well, maybe I don't. The thing to me that's most important is the actual hot dog. I know maybe that's not the case
Yeah.
for some.
No, I agree.
And it's got to have a nice snap when you bite into it. Right? Am I wrong?
No,
Yeah.
you're right. And
You're
actually, when we go to minor league baseball games here in the Lehigh Valley, and I don't get the normal hot dog, I get the what do you call
The brat.
the Polish
The
Polish-
bratwurst.
Smoky.
Or the Polish. Yeah.
the Polish sausage. What's the
Yeah.
Polish sausage called?
Kielbasa.
A smoky?
Kielbasa.
He
It's
gets
fantastic.
the kielbasa.
And I order it plain, and I do what you were just talking about. It's just
Mustard and relish. That's it. Yellow
Relish.
mustard.
Yep.
Not Dijon.
Yeah. If you want to see me really upset, give me honey mustard on a hot dog.
Oh, why?
Yeah,
Please,
that's
people.
happened. I'm like, what
People.
fresh hell is this?
People, let's get serious here.
We've gotten way off target here. Anyway,
Yeah.
Well,
I don't
I'm
mean to
just-
drag
you
you
know what,
back
I'm
to the
stalling.
gaming part of it.
No. I'm
Yeah.
stalling because I want to pull up a picture of this hot
oh
dog.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
I
don't mean to drag you back to the gaming part, but for my friends who are in the gaming industry, there's a lot of folks who are really looking forward to Bobby Kotick going away.
Well,
God,
that's true.
yes.
Activision is a
Yes.
problem.
That's almost the number one reason to let this go through.
Yeah.
Well, and
Right? Get rid of this
generally
guy.
speaking, the folks I know who are working for other groups
Right.
that have now been acquired by Microsoft, like Microsoft's HR and sort of policies around things make for better work. So,
Yeah.
folks are happy.
100%. 100%.
So here's a Mad Dog's hot dog, which I can't
Right.
believe this is yours. It must be your wife's. Has lettuce
Nope.
on it.
No, that's mine. And let me tell you what this thing is called. It's called the Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah, I was thinking, it looks like a Chicago
It's
dog.
a Chicago dog
Yes.
with that pickle
It's-
wedge. But
that's
what's
exactly
the
right.
lettuce? The lettuce. It should
It's,
have bright
listen,
green
I
relish.
told you
on
it does, and underneath it's fresh and wonderful, and it is.
Oh, I'm so depressed. I want that dog badly.
We can walk there. That's how close that place is.
Roy's at the Yard, which is Also walkable here. It's the place actually where cows go to die. It's the auction yard for cattle in Petaluma. But they also have a Roy's at the Yard restaurant, which features Chicago dogs. And they're supposedly good. I've never gotten over there. Although I worry because I think it's a Vienna sausage hot dog, which I don't.
You know what?
consider.
That might be interesting. I like I said, the Polish sausage thing is.
I think Vienna sausage is actually the traditional Chicago dog, I believe.
The problem is you grow up in the United States and you eat hot dogs. You think this is what sausages are, and then you have good sausages. But here's the thing:
then you go to Nuremberg.
You can make a really good hot dog that's as good as any sausage. It's just very rare.
Yeah.
Well, you guys got to make it up to Vancouver. We have Japadog.
What's a dog?
Japadog.
Japadog.
Does it have fish eggs
on it? That does not sound good.
Orange and black caviar.
A little nori.
It sounds vaguely racist, and it doesn't sound good.
Yeah. Little Japanese meal, a little
Japadog.
meal, a little teriyaki.
It has
That's my grandma
has real
called the
wasabi
Japanese
sauce.
from World War II.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Anyway, let's move on because the other big story. So that was, in my opinion, I thought a big story.
Honestly, I think Mad Dogs was the big story of the week.
Mad Dogs number 2. The number 3 story of the week was earnings. Earnings came out. Before you do that, though, I want to take a little break because we don't want the ads to happen all at once. So let's put that on hold. You go get a dog. I'm so jealous. When does Mad Dogs close?
Monday is the last day.
Monday. Is it too late to get tickets to fly out to Macungie? I was at the Philadelphia airport last Friday. I could have run on over.
Popped down
for a Mad Dog. We had a 5-day layover. 5 hour. It felt like 5 days. It was only 5 hours. That's a long layover, but that was so customs could examine our luggage. Sure. Perhaps you've noticed whenever you watch our shows, ACI Learning, the sponsor of our studios. Thank you, ACI Learning. We really appreciate that. Also, the sponsor of our shows. You might say, well, what is ACI Learning when it's at home? Well, you may know the name IT Pro. IT Pro's been with us for a decade now, one of our sponsors. We love IT Pro. You now get the Audit Pro. You get the expanded practice labs. You get hubs, which means, because everybody has a different way of learning. Some people say, well, I like remote learning. It's convenient, but every once in a while, I want to spend some time with an instructor in another class. They have hubs, learning hubs, where you can go actually in person as well. Individual training, yes, but I think your whole team needs to know about this. There are companies out there with IT teams that are really the first line of defense. Without your great think about it. Without your great IT team, does the business thrive? Does it survive even? You got to keep that team trained, and teams love the chance to take training from ACI Learning. 6,800 hours of content, always new content, always fresh, because this stuff is constantly changing, right? That's why they have 7 studios, and Monday through Friday, all day, they're making new material, new shows. Another thing I love about these is 6,800 hours. It's not hours. It's actually half hours or less. Because what they realize is no one can absorb a 90-minute lecture on anything, even whiskey barrels. You've got to, chunk it up. So that's what they do. They have transcripts. You can read as you watch. They have hands-on labs. That's really important. Again, there's different learners, right? Some people need to read it. Some people need to hear it. Some people need to do it. Some people need to see it. It's all of that. They got it all. And it's training for everything. For your team, whether it's CompTIA or Microsoft or Cisco or Linux or Apple or security or cloud and on and on and on. I mean, they've got it all. They've got it all covered. And your team wants this. You want it for your team because you want them to protect you. You want them to be up to date, right? CompTIA courses, let's take that as an example from IT Pro and ACI Learning. They let you level up your employees who are interested, as you ought to be too, in cybersecurity. These certifications, of course, show that you've got a skill set, but it's more than that. They tell your customers that you're committed to keeping your organization up to date, that their data with you is safe. Our team, all certified, that's a big deal. And ACI Learning was with you every step of the way. Customizable training with a great dashboard that lets you assign little bits of it or big bits or whatever to individuals, to teams, to groups. You can track their monthly usage. You can see their logins. You can see their viewing time. You can see when they've completed tracks, when they haven't completed tracks. So it really makes it easy to see how your team's doing, to manage your teams. You get full advanced reporting, which is very great for showing the board and the C-suite and customers that your team is getting that training. You've got very nice visual reports. So for teams from 2 to 1,000, and yes, there are companies out there with IT teams of 1,000 people, IT Pro and ACI Learning are there for you. Volume discounts start at 5 seats. In fact, you can even get a free 2-week trial for your team. They've also got these great programs. Coming up next month, May 18th, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern, they're going to do a webinar open to all things cybersecurity. Naomi Buckwalter, who's the Director of Product Security for Contrast Security and founder and executive director of Cybersecurity Gatebreakers Foundation, will be there. You'll learn what it takes to be a security architect. It's kind of a higher level, looking at it at a higher level. Tips for advancing your cybersecurity career, how to bridge the knowledge gap in cybersecurity for individuals, for teams too. Thursday, May 18th, 2 p.m. Eastern. But this is just part of an ongoing thing ACI Learning is always doing to keep you up to date. From entry-level training to putting people on the moon, ACI Learning has you covered. Maintain your company's competitive edge with ACI Learning. All you have to do is go to the website, find out more. The team training is fantastic. go.acilearning.com/twit. And please use that whole thing so that they know you saw it here. That's really important to us. go.acilearning.com/twit. go.acilearning.com/twit. And if you're as an individual looking to start today, we've got a deal for you. For a standard or premium individual IT Pro membership, 30% off. The offer code TWIT30, TWIT30. Do it. That's all I can say. Just do it. Go.acilearning.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support of Windows Weekly. Couldn't do it without you guys, and supporting the studio and all of that. We really appreciate this. All right, now it's time for some earnings learnings.
Wait, I have some breaking news.
Breaking news.
The Mad Dog's Facebook account says, stay tuned for some exciting news. And there are 3 exclamation points. So I think it might be good news.
We're coming back. Well, so you're saying the owner's retired. So maybe they're selling it to the employees. That would be the best possible.
Literally 5 days ago, they announced, or maybe it was 10 days ago or whatever. Like, since we've moved here, they announced they were retiring. It's like, guys, we just got here.
Just found you.
Anyway.
Don't go away.
I never understood why someone wouldn't buy this business or continue it or whatever, but anyhow.
Is it a whole restaurant? Is it a stand? What is it?
It's a former house. So it's house sized.
It's a house.
It's indoor and outdoor seating. Is an ice cream shop.
Oh my God.
It's right on the edge of a park.
You got the best food in Macungie. I don't understand it.
I don't understand how this anyway, sorry.
The food in Macungie.
Me falling in love with it is what killed it.
Just go to Paul's Insta and the amazing things that they eat in Macungie. It's incredible. All right. Enough of that. Although someday I hope to walk the borough of Macungie Trail. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I have hoped one day to be able to delineate what that trail is. We've been trying to research it. We can't figure it out.
Paul's going to revitalize it. So let's talk earnings.
Yes.
It was good and it was bad. It was good for many things.
It was good for everything except for the stuff that I care about.
Yeah, so, Xbox. Not so great.
It's good for Microsoft overall. I would say, there's no way to know this for sure, but one of the bits of math that I did for this earnings report was whether or not, and again, you have to kind of guesstimate here, do more than 50% of Microsoft's revenues now come from the cloud? And I believe that they do, right? So they've been kind of marketing themselves as this cloud computing force, for the past decade or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And now they are, And the interesting, I also actually, I put this in my analysis. We'll get to this. Richard will enjoy my AI theory of the week,
nice.
Which is a new feature of Windows Weekly. So the hard numbers, because I come up with one almost every week. The hard numbers are 18.3 billion in net income on revenues of 52.9 billion. Those are both gains year over year, 9% and 7% respectively. That's good. Microsoft cloud-focused businesses are, again, their top businesses. Intelligent Cloud, which is basically Azure and Server, 22.1 billion, up 16%. Productivity and business processes, which is Office, Microsoft 365, LinkedIn, Dynamics, is in second place, so to speak, 17.5 billion in revenues, up 11% year over year. And then more personal computing, Windows, Xbox, and Surface. Can't stop walking into that door. Is 13.3 billion in revenues, down 9% year over year.
Yikes, 9%.
Yeah.
Is that mostly
Yeah.
Surface though? Because
It's mostly-
PC sales are terrible. We know that for everybody.
all of this sales, everything in this business is terrible. So we'll get to that. Unfortunately. So here's my new AI theory. We should have music for this. Paul's AI theory.
Paul's AI theory.
Microsoft's stock price was stagnant for over a decade when Steve Ballmer was CEO. It was right in the $30-$35 range forever.
Mhm.
And Satya Nadella took over and new Microsoft, blah, blah, whatever. They are now the second biggest company in the world by market cap. Their stock price is through the roof. Wall Street loves them.
$295. Yeah.
And the reason they love them is all this cloud computing stuff. And I don't have the exact number on this, but for years, like quarters of years in a row, if that makes sense, many quarters in a row, Microsoft would tout 70+% growth in Azure revenues, right? Sometime I want to say last year that started falling finally, as it would. It's the market's maturing. You can't grow. I mean, that kind of rate is just off the
Eventually
charts.
you move the workloads.
Yeah, it just doesn't, there's not much you can do about that. So I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I'm going to say a year ago, Azure revenues probably grew, I want to say 46%, something like that. Flash forward to this past quarter, it hit 27%. It's on the way down. So my AI theory of the week is, hey, Wall Street being excited by us is what's driven our stock price, which is what's driven our market value. We need to do something to inject that excitement again. That thing is AI.
Mhm.
Huh?
I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that. I just think they found it by accident.
Yeah.
Because it was really, that was what wasn't quite a wholly owned subsidiary before, but clearly is now.
Right.
Actually having an experiment that got a bit out of control.
Yeah. AI has maybe gotten so good that it acted on its own for all we know. Maybe AI is holding Microsoft hostage. It's hard to say.
Well, somebody's having hallucinations, and I don't think it's the software.
Yes. So just, I mean, I'm going to look primarily at more personal computing. There's a part of productivity and business processes, which is Office, Office 365, Microsoft 365 Teams. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but, and Richard, I don't know if you care enough about the rest of the company to talk about any of that, but I'll just say that things are not going so well in in Mudville. So Windows revenues from PC makers fell 28% in the quarter. Surface revenues, devices revenues, Surface, fell by 30%. These match neatly to the IDC numbers that PC sales in that quarter fell about 29%, right? Same time period. We'll see. We don't have the Gartner numbers yet, but these things seem to make some sense.
That have been expected.
Yeah. Well, not as bad as last quarter. I don't remember the exact number again, but 37, 39%, something like that for revenues from PC makers. That was the fall off. So it's trending in the right direction, but obviously we want to see this, flatline at some point. Hopefully this year, we'll see, but
New hardware in the fall, like that's their best shot for.
Yeah. And there was some interesting sort of interesting information from Microsoft about this. They said something to the tune that PC sales were actually better than they had expected. It's like, okay. And that part of the problem was that there was a lot of inventory sitting on shelves around the channel, right? In other words, that we had sold these PCs into the channel, people hadn't bought them, and now they're just kind of sitting there. And we have to get through that backlog before this thing kind of turns around. The problem for Microsoft is that revenues from PC makers don't reflect PC sales from this quarter. Typically, they reflect PC sales from previous quarters because they sold those licenses to PC makers ahead of time, so to speak, right? So it's, I don't know what to say about that. But in the good news department for Windows, commercial products and cloud services revenues for Windows increased 14%. It didn't have a lot to do with Windows. Like, in other words, there wasn't anything that Windows did to make that true, but because Windows is part of Microsoft 365 as licensed to enterprises, There was a
There's
lot
an
of redoing.
apportion happening there.
Yeah, that
So
had nothing. Yeah, just
you sell more M365, Windows gets to show some revenue. I mean, it really shows just how much
Yeah.
M365 they're selling these days.
yeah.
I
Exactly.
do think the powerhouse is Office.
I agree. Yep.
You know,
Yep. Yeah, there are more people using Office than there are people using Windows. That's one way
Yeah.
to look at it. I mean, because you don't have to be on Windows, right?
well, and your timing's right about the 10 years, right? It was in 2013 that they finally picked cloud over Windows when they shipped Android and
Yeah.
iOS versions of Office.
That's right.
You know, that was sort of, to me internally, that was their pivot moment. It's like,
Right.
because they had been promised that iOS and Android were going to become irrelevant because Windows everywhere was going to solve all problems. They were going to have a perfect tablet and phone solution, and that, why would you bother? And
Yeah.
then when that didn't quite work out,
Yeah, it was close.
well, it was close. Missed it,
it was just
Like-
it just missed it.
just a little bit.
It's, by the way, not a horrible idea, just in theory,
No, no.
right? Single app model, all that. But yeah, it is interesting that we'll just tie it to Satya Nadella. It's not completely him, but this
No.
era of Microsoft coincides with this push to the cloud. Office was a product that was able to move to the cloud very successfully. Windows, not so
Well, and I
much.
think they had been driven by the fear of Google Docs, and that's a good
Yes.
fear to have.
That's right.
And they certainly were going their own way on that. So
Although-
they needed a cloud, I think, even before Microsoft really
Yeah.
thought they needed a cloud.
By the way, to that point, one of the, Google Docs showed up whatever year that was. And
Mhm.
one of the first things that they offered out of the box, I think, was this notion of real-time collaboration, right? You could have a Google Doc or a sheet or whatever it was, and two or more people could be in there editing side by side.
Right.
This was something that Microsoft had a lot of trouble with because their software is kind of, legacy code base, whatever. And one of the reasons we use Notion here is because Mary Jo and I at the time you could not collaborate in real time together. We used to tell each other when we were done with the notes and get in and out. And so I was
Right. Or if you're using OneNote, you'll keep corrupting it, right?
That's right. It was horrific. So this morning I was working on the show notes and something started animating below me. And I was like, what the hell, what's going on here? And it was you.
Yep.
And you were in there
put my
doing-
pieces in.
Yep. And by the way, no problem at all.
Yeah.
So-
not a thing.
It is, it's interesting and coincidental that it's possibly this year, Microsoft will finally have, kind of solved this problem by introducing Loop, which was designed for this use case from the get-go, right? So it took them, 15 years. I don't know what.
Well, the problem is that they were bound to Windows. So you kept having to have that client to server interaction where Google said, it's browser, baby. And that's all there is. And that naturally means constant conversation back to the client, to the server.
Right. It's not coincidental that real-time collaboration works in the web-based versions of Word and Excel and whatever else in ways that it just doesn't work well in the desktop.
Yeah, I always get the sense that Microsoft the Office guys would love to kill the client-side products.
Yes,
right. Love to.
Well, I mean, yeah, okay, yeah. That comes up a lot. Could they move to web-based? I mean, yeah, I think we're getting there.
They could. Could they make it? Could they make a browser open as slowly as Word? I don't know. That'd be challenging. It takes a while.
No, these are the guys that made IE. They can do it.
Yeah. Can they widescreen a browser as well as like a widescreen Outlook? I don't know. It's worth a try.
In a related theory department, Microsoft is in the midst of upgrading. Well, some people wouldn't agree with that term, but migrating Outlook to this new client, right? Which is obviously a web-based code base. And it's tough because Outlook, like the rest of Office, everyone has their pet feature that they need, and it's a different feature for everybody. And there are 11,000 features, and you can't do every single thing in this rich desktop client on the web. You just can't. And so it's not going to please anybody. Like that's, but I sort of feel like this is the test case. If we can get this Outlook client to fly, then Word, Excel, PowerPoint have to follow.
Outlook's always been the orphan in some respects until OneNote came along. I think they felt bad for Outlook, so they brought in OneNote to make a real serious orphan.
Sure.
As opposed to the products that got kicked, brought in and kicked out.
Yeah, the ones that didn't work at all, like InfoPath and
InfoPath. Yeah, that didn't last long.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a bit cool.
So let's see. All right. So Windows bad, Office good, and Surface terrible. The only notable thing
Xbox took a beating too.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. Don't worry. Surface will be quick because Surface came up once in the earnings report and it came up once on the call, once the entire time.
Wow.
If you search the transcript, the word Surface actually appears twice. twice, but the other time was because they were using it as the word surface, small s, not as the product, as in we are surfacing it, something like that. They didn't talk about it at all. So revenues fell by 30%. Again, you could tie this into the whole, product sitting in the shelves, whatever, not being sold. Okay. And then Xbox. And Xbox is a tricky one. And I'm not sure if I give Microsoft a pass on some of this. So, for example, hardware sales, which is consoles, peripherals, et cetera, fell 30% year over year.
Now, you're talking about comparing against 2022, when nobody had anything to do but play consoles, and the only reason to buy 2021 is there wasn't any.
Right. So that's the exact caveat that Microsoft provided, which was they didn't say it this way, but this is like an unfavorable year-over-year compare. Like, compared
to 2019, like then you'll see something.
Yeah. Well, so the issue here is that Microsoft, when those consoles first came out, they were in short supply.
Yeah.
And there was a magical moment last year where the Xbox Series S, especially, but let's say the new Xboxes, were available. You could buy them, and that was this quarter a year ago. So they're kind of saying, like, well, 30%.
Yeah, this explosive quarter.
Yeah. So you could look at some of the other numbers then, right? So, for example, gaming overall fell 4%. Xbox content and services
still feels like residual.
Yep. No, Xbox content and services actually went up 3%, right? So that's the part of the business that includes the subscriptions, right? And one of the things they said in the conference call is that the Xbox subscriptions, as they put it, so they must mean Game Pass plus Xbox Live Gold,
right,
are about to surpass $1 billion in revenues per quarter.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
No, and it shows that that was Ballmer's metric. Only show me a business when it's $1 billion business,
right?
But it's not like Xbox is any slouch. They may be struggling against PS5, and they're not struggling against anybody else.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. And this is a business that would probably compare very favorably to PlayStation if they had a mobile play.
Yeah.
So thanks, UK.
Which they're still miles away from getting. I mean, just because you own the company.
I just point this out too. I've written this somewhere, but I appreciate Microsoft talking about how we don't have a big play in mobile. We don't have any play in mobile actually, and basically, and this is one way we can get going on this. Microsoft has tremendous IP. They have lots of game franchises: Halo, Gears, etc., Sea of Thieves, whatever. You're telling me you couldn't have made mobile versions of these games, guys? Come on, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I know there were some Halo mobile games that are not real Halo, right?
Yes.
Call of Duty is on mobile. There's no reason Halo couldn't be on mobile. Just saying.
No, and it's just you need to build out the skill set. Right? They, in the end, those really do need to be native apps. So that means you've got Swift developers and Java developers, which I think they certainly have Java developers to build their own version of Java these days. So there's no reason.
Microsoft building its own version of Java. That's crazy talk.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
What goes around comes around. Anyway.
Yeah, well, once your dev stack's owned by Oracle, you'll take any port in a storm.
Right? I think Apple does that too. And I know Linux does, the OpenJDK. Sure. So, who's using Oracle Java after all?
Well, yeah, that's true. It's the original Java.
Yeah. I usually...
Don't you have to license it? I mean, is it?
Yeah, I was just saying, I was just thinking through this. Like, you get Java as part of like the Android SDK, and I assume that's OpenJDK, isn't it? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, because Oracle sued Google because they won't use Oracle's Java.
Yeah. So I think it must be open. Right. It must be OpenJDK.
Well, I don't know if it's OpenJDK, but it's something that Oracle doesn't
something
like.
That's not. What else is there? What are you talking about? It's like they're using Microsoft. They're using Visual J++ 6.0. Okay. Anyway, sorry. So, and then with regards to Office stuff, Teams surpassed 300 million monthly active users in the quarter. In January, that number was 280. So that's going up again. They didn't talk about this, remember, for several months. For some reason, after talking about it endlessly before that, they're back to talking about it. So that's moving in the right direction. There's also a whole Teams ecosystem. I'm not going to have there are no hard numbers here, but there are things like Teams Rooms, Teams Phones, Teams Premium. That whole ecosystem is exploding right now. So that's Teams as a platform. Of course it is, right? Teams can almost be something that sits beside Office, and as we'll discuss in the future, maybe something that has to sit beside Office. We'll see about that. And then everything's up here. I mean, everything Office is up. Office commercial revenue is up 13%. Paid Office 365 commercial seats were up 11% to 382 million. Office consumer revenues were basically flat, up 1%. And the number of users there is up 12% to 65.4.
These are big
million.
numbers, you know.
Yep.
This is not you're emerging a new market.
300 million Teams users is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Who are these people?
Especially when compare it. Okay. Here's what's interesting about this to me. I'll tell you who they are. There are 382 million paid Office 365 commercial seats. That's who they are.
Yeah.
Right.
So one of the issues I had with Teams uptick, maybe 2 years ago was how are these numbers not the same number?
Right.
Right.
Who are these 82 million people who refuse?
Yeah, you're telling me there are hundreds of millions of people not using this thing?
But when they say that number, it's active users. It's not just like they own it.
It's active users. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Someone, TQ, I guess, does actively using Teams include uninstalling Teams? No, that's
You have to open it once a month. to be
it's
in a
actively
monthly active user.
not using Teams.
Yeah. Open it once a month.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about Teams later.
It's probably the 300 million people who are using it calling the 382 million people.
Yeah.
Or like maybe 150 million people use it, but they call the other 100 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and they're calling IT to find out how do they get rid of it.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a tip. There's a good. We're going to talk about this. There's a tip for getting rid of Teams. It's not as easy as it sounds. All right,
It's not as easy as it sounds. That's Microsoft's motto, I think.
Yep. There's a funny thing about Teams where if you just uninstall the business client, if you acquired it through work, in other words, it was delivered to your PC, you either downloaded the suite from work, or you already had the suite, and then after a certain date, a couple of years ago, whenever it was, they actually just send it to your computer. If you just go and uninstall it, it will come back. And so
I know you missed me.
There's a trick. Yeah, there's a trick to that. You can say no.
Save that for your tip.
Yeah, it's not my tip, but it's just
It's a good tip. Save it. Save it.
Probably. Well, I don't.
tip.
How to not use Microsoft software. The new, my next book.
So you don't want to use Microsoft.
Yeah.
So what does this tell us about Microsoft's business? What is their business?
See, to me, the takeaway here is what I said up front, which is that they have crossed that line where they are what they've been saying they are.
Mhm.
They are a cloud computing company, right?
Yeah.
This has been the mantra under Satya Nadella. We're going to refocus everything on the cloud. The businesses that can't or haven't gone along with that are the ones that are down right now, which is kind of just probably coincidental. Honestly, it's just something that's happening right now. But Windows is a product line that doesn't lend itself well to the web. To the cloud. I know there's Windows 365 and all that, but Surface is by nature, it's a hardware line, hardware product line. And then Office, we just talked, I'm sorry, not Office, Xbox, we talked about, cloud gaming is going to be this small thing. Cloud gaming is not the future of Xbox, unfortunately.
Mhm.
It's part of the future of Xbox, right? I think the future of Xbox is this heterogeneous, we're going to meet you where you are type of thing, where we're going to let you play games wherever you are. And for most people, those games are going to be native apps,
Because they play better.
Because they play better.
Yeah. I mean, I would also argue that all of the hardware bound businesses, and Windows is one of them,
Mhm.
are taking a beating because of the end of the pandemic and those
That's right.
anomalous years.
Yep.
But I would argue that's true for cloud too, because those were anomalous years for cloud. They just happen to still come into positive because there's still lots of room to grow here. We've been in a saturated market for PCs since 2010.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, cloud's the
it's
kind of thing
maturity
you
of
turn it
market.
on, you don't turn it off. Now, the pandemic's over, I can turn off the cloud. You just use more. So,
I look, the
getting them to
natural
turn it
reaction
on
to
was the
this-
big deal, and that's why they benefited in COVID. And
it was
they're not
almost a
going
bait
back
and switch,
down.
right? Remember during the pandemic, Zoom and Teams did this, and a lot of services probably did this. They said, look, we're going to relax some of our restrictions because we
Mhm.
understand this is unprecedented times. It was nice. But the problem is people use the stuff they get used to it. And now these companies are turning those things, dialing them back, right? Teams Premium is made up of some new services, but there's also some older services that used to be free during the pandemic that now they're charging for. And that obviously rubs people the wrong way, right? As it would. But this is the reality of the world. And so usage was definitely up during the pandemic, but aside from, people bought a new PC, right? All of a sudden we just remembered we need PCs. These services, I mean, I think the goal of a lot of people is to do less of this stuff now, right? It's
Mhm.
like, I
People
would
are
like to do
remarkably
fewer.
burned out of screens.
Yeah. Yep. It's
Is it just me, or is Microsoft kind of slow at releasing new Surface products?
it is not just you.
Okay, because it feels like Lenovo and Dell and HP,
Yeah.
they're constantly putting out new stuff.
Yeah.
And Surface is
So-
feeling a little like almost date. I know they've just put out the Surface
Lenovo-
Pro 9, but it feels a little dated almost.
They didn't just put out the Surface Pro 9.
Oh.
So that's the thing. So yeah, Lenovo and HP and Dell and all those companies, that's their business, right?
Yeah, that's all
their
they
business.
do. Yeah.
The Surface PC line is it's like a corner bicycle shop, It's just not the same level. Well, I mean, it's kind of a boutique brand. I mean, really. I think they finally gotten into the point. We talked about this, I think, a few shows ago. This notion that they ran into a lot of reliability issues several years ago, and it was really hard to recommend them. Even though I really like Surface PCs personally, but if a non-technical person came to me and said, "Hey, I'm looking. What do you think I should get?" And they do.
Well,
I
if they
don't-
have your phone number,
Yeah. Well,
You
people
know,
I know. I mean, in other words,
then
like I
you-
get these.
then you're pretty careful.
I don't right exactly. I don't recommend Surface products to others, but then again, if enough years of this go by, yes. So that's one thing. And the other thing is the issue that Leo just raised, which is they don't rev these things enough in some cases. And what happens is they do typically have a big release cycle in the fall.
Yeah.
They
What's
have a
once a year?
smaller thing in the spring sometimes.
I don't think it's anything this spring.
Yeah. But you won't see them revamp everything. That's the problem. So like this year, it's like which 5 of the 7 products are we going to get? And then one will kind of remain in market or two, for another year or something. So you do get this. It does feel like a little bit of a slow boil.
We got in October last year, we got the Pro 9 and the Laptop 5.
Yep.
We haven't had a new Surface book. Well, we had the Surface Studio.
Surface Studio, yeah.
Right, instead of a Surface
Studio.
So,
So that's due. Those are all due, I would say, right? This coming year. There were Kev Brewer put in something about. Well, I guess it's from my side, but this notion of Microsoft. I think we talked about this last week. This notion of Microsoft looking at smaller versions of the tablet form factor because we need more of these things, including an ARM powered Surface Go 4, which is the small one. Okay.
now, I think you and I have already debated this, but the real innovation coming here will be some kind of NPU.
Yeah, for 100%. Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that makes their large language model products sing.
Yep. And
And then they can play that little game where it's like, hey, if you're using, our Copilot products on a Surface device, it costs this much.
Right.
But if you don't have a Surface device, it's all the compute's on the cloud then, and it costs you more.
Right. Yeah, we're going to see.
You know what? Speaking of NPUs, the top line on this for me is when you compare Microsoft's quarterly report with Google's.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're seeing a shift. Google's going down, man, and Microsoft's going up. And it all ended up being about AI. And Google's mishandled this. Sundar Pichai is not exactly a visionary. I'm starting to see rumbles that maybe Google is in its decline.
I don't know that there's any profit in these large language models yet, but certainly the gestalt has been consumed by.
I don't want to.
Profit would be that if people stop using Google search and start using Bing search, maybe profit is step 3.
So I would just say yes, but people did and would have said that about Microsoft during the Steve Ballmer years, right? Whether it was fair or not.
That's true, and they came back. But I think that is the exception that proves the rule because they got an amazing CEO who literally turned the company around. This is
Well, I mean, it's not like they were sinking down the drain or anything, but
but he pivoted the company, don't you think?
Well, he's certainly
You talking about Satya?
credit for it.
Yeah.
I mean,
the company was already pivoting. Satya
it was just he was the
okay. Yeah, I know a lot of people say, "Oh, don't forget, Steve Ballmer began this process." Blah blah blah.
Well, he did all of it. Yeah, no, he really.
Ballmer knew the future was the cloud, and he was an impediment.
And he stepped down.
He got out of the way,
and he put the right person in.
He needed a place to scream, and he found a basketball team. It's excellent.
Nevertheless, I don't think that's a common thing. No. Most companies decline.
What you're really talking about here is, when does Pashar get replaced?
Yeah, and there's no reason that can't happen immediately. No,
the board should.
Can't happen.
Well, they should have replaced him years ago. It's obvious.
But but different people have different skill sets, and they're better in certain situations. It's the there was it doesn't matter. But
I understand
the notion is
all of this is ephemeral. But at the moment, it really looks like Microsoft is kind of.
You need a different guy for war than you need for leadership during calm times, right?
But Sundar
was great for a time, and then he wanted to nuke China.
You could argue Ballmer wasn't as good as. I mean, Pichai's not even as good as Ballmer was. And
I don't know. Look, Google today earns more revenues and bigger profits than Microsoft does.
But their big stuff, search and ads sales are down.
Okay,
not gross is down. The numbers are down.
I know. By the way, Google Cloud just had their first ever profit this quarter.
Well, that's true.
Interesting.
Okay, you're right. That's a good point. Maybe So are they going to be smart enough to say,
Google
the future's in the cloud?
Also, 17% of Google's revenues are some tiny percent.
Yeah.
So that doesn't really matter too much. No, I just don't think there are up and down times. I just don't think it doesn't necessarily mean Google's still humongous. Like, it doesn't mean they're doomed, and they still have incredible AI power that they could wield.
And they could turn it around. But
I agree, it might require leadership change.
If you had said 10 years ago, who's going to be the bigger company in 2023, Microsoft or Google? Would you bet on Microsoft?
No, but would you would bet on Apple?
Right.
This whole world is topsy-turvy.
No, right. So Apple maybe, but
I will say it's interesting that the two biggest companies in the world have been around since the 1970s.
And they're the oldest. The thing I'm thinking is, what's the disruptive technology of the 2020s? It's AI, and
that's right.
One would have thought Google would have a massive head start on that. I think they did.
Okay. But disrupting your own business is hard, right?
Yes.
We talked about this, I think, before you went away, this notion that Steve Jobs did this with the iPod and the iPhone. Companies just don't do that. So I agree that AI could and probably will disrupt these markets. Whether Microsoft will be the company that takes advantage of that is an open question. I think OpenAI and ChatGPT and these technologies will float a lot of boats. I don't know that Microsoft's going to have a big differentiator because
they own half of OpenAI.
I know that's fine. I mean, on the back end, but as far as like their consumer-facing brands, I mean, Bing is still a boat anchor. I can't stress this enough, how bad that brand is, and that Microsoft is latching.
Somebody reminded me the other day, I said, I don't know why they went with Bing. He said, well, what did Satya do before he became head of cloud and then ultimately CEO?
Yeah, he worked on Bing.
He was the Bing guy.
Yeah, but that means he should know better.
Well, except he gets a call from his old Bing guys who say, we've been working on this thing in private for a couple of years. It's clearly hot. 100 million users. Come on.
I do agree. So imagine Microsoft came out and said, hey, look, we have this AI thing now. We're going to call it Copilot. That's the brand, right? And people we would all agree that's a good brand. But when you go to search and you failed with Microsoft, we forget the other ones. Remember, there was Microsoft Live Search. There were other names to this thing. We all mocked it when they went to Bing, and it's been Bing for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You rebrand that thing again, that really sends a bad message, right?
Oh,
that tells you
that
tells you that, and I think that's why. That's the real reason why. But it's latching yourself to that brand is such a mistake.
Yeah, but I think it was also the quickest mover. The product that's going to matter is M365 Copilot. I
agree.
That's the one. That's the only thing that could take. That's the whole market. The idea that an information worker is going to have a chat with some software before they start work in the beginning of the day, it's pretty profound.
It's it's almost like monopoly maintenance in a way. It's it's what allows them to retain the advantage they already have.
Mhm.
And it
Well,
makes
and,
those
and
products
deal with a
even more
huge
important.
problem, which is you don't know which product to use. Now you don't have to know because the tool's now going to tell you which product to use based on what you asked for. I don't want to see the wrestling matches inside of Microsoft about what product gets recommended first. But, it's still really powerful. You guarantee it's going to steer you towards various Microsoft products.
Yeah, we could. Yes, we can state that with certainty.
Yeah, it's ready. So I need to edit this photo. Have you looked
Yeah.
at Photoshop? Don't
Yeah.
think that's going to happen.
Right. That's right.
Although, I mean, if they did this at the Windows level and provided an interface for third-party
you know what?
software,
Actually, you just hit on something that's kind of interesting because we think of office productivity, knowledge worker stuff as a certain thing. It's word processing, it's spreadsheets, whatever. But what we're really talking about here is what today we would call creators, right?
right?
It's a little goofy to me to say that Microsoft was actually kind of onto this term early on. You will remember the first couple of Windows 10 updates were called creator updates. We all made fun of them for that.
Yes.
Everyone's a creator. You know what? Everyone is a creator, right? In a way. And so you could kind of expand the types of things that AI can improve from a productivity standpoint away from traditional or aside from traditional productivity to include these kinds of new types of productivity, right? Blog writing and YouTube video scripts and video editing and image editing, et cetera, et cetera. I think you're going to see Microsoft make a big push in that stuff too. So you had just said, they're not going to recommend Adobe Photoshop. That's true. That's because they have something called Microsoft Designer,
Right.
or whatever these other tools they have are. So yes, they have Clipchamp even, which I know sounds goofy, but as we've talked about, that's actually a really rich video editing solution.
Yeah, I
And
just recently played with it, and it's not bad.
It's actually fairly excellent. I mean, I use Adobe Photoshop, or Adobe Premiere, and everything granted, I'm not Tim Burton or anything, but everything I need is in Clipchamp, and it's free. I mean, it's not horrible.
There's a premium version if you want it, but I'm not sure what it would do better other than stop putting made with Clipchamp on every file.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot more stock imagery and video and blah, 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 whatever.
Right.
But one of the things that's coming to that is 4K output, which does not exist today.
And once again, we get back to this whole idea of who's been innovating in their monopolies for the past 20 years. Because the only thing we've seen in innovation for search by Google is more ads per square inch.
Sure.
And
well, it worked for a little while, it's been working. And I think the lack of competition, good, strong competition, has allowed that to stagnate.
Yes.
But like we were saying, this disruption doesn't come from Google. It comes from outside of Google. But, one of the things that disruption could cause, I wonder if there isn't an example of this, there probably is for the market leader to change in response to that disruption and retain the lead, right? That could still happen.
Mm-hmm. And we're better for it. Sometimes they need a little smack in the head to get moving.
I just thought of a great example of this. So Microsoft adopted ARM again for Windows 10. And I talked to Terry Myerson about this at the time. And he went on this rant about these stupid little Intel stickers that were on all laptops. It drove him insane. He's like, my goal is to get rid of those stickers. That's all I care about. I just want to get rid of those.
Really?
And the way he hated those stickers. So one of the side effects of this push to ARM is Terry and Microsoft and the Windows org today, whatever they are, doesn't really care if like Qualcomm wins or Intel wins or whatever. They just want all PCs to be better. So if all Qualcomm achieves is to get Intel to make more efficient chips, victory, right? It doesn't really matter who wins, in this case, but the impact has been felt. Yeah.
Well, and we clearly saw that with the last ARM cycle, right? Like the big thing that happened was Atom.
Right. But the big thing now, they've changed their architecture.
Yep.
Now Intel chipsets have hybrid architectures with performant and high efficient cores. They would never have gone in that direction if it wasn't for ARM, right? They would have just kept. We would have 10 gigahertz Pentium 4 chips now. That's what we would be doing, and they would
our own little liquid nitrogen.
They would be
trying to keep them
heating
cool.
the apartment. Exactly. Yeah,
everything would have been fine.
Yeah, like those old tile-based heaters in Eastern Europe, except it would be a desktop computer.
Every palace should have one.
Yeah.
Let's take a little break. Come back. Much more to talk about. We got products. We got Windows. We got 11. We got Microsoft 365. We got Xbox. Whatever number, and tips and apps and Licka. We're going to
We're
going east. We're going to Japan. All of that coming up as Windows Weekly continues. You stay here, you Windows and Dozers. Want to tell you about our sponsor, Lookout. Well, you know, if you listen to Security Now, you know we're in a world of hurt. We're in a world of hurt, and it's just getting worse because, and by the way, this is employees love it, enlightened management loves it. Our data, our endpoints are all over now. Business has changed forever. This is the product of the pandemic. Boundaries where we work, even how we work, disappeared. Like I said, employees love it, but it could be problematic for security. Your data is always on the move. It might be on a device. It might be in the cloud. It might be across networks. It might be sitting down at the local hot dog stand. And that's great for your workforce. It's a challenge for IT security. That's why you need Lookout. See, these days, you know, a lot of people have, we got 23 different security programs running, and we got, of course, our legacy tools, and it becomes the most complex kind of Rube Goldberg environment when you could, in fact, have one solution that does it all. Lookout helps you control your data, free your workforce. You get complete visibility into all your data. You can minimize risk from external threats, but, you know, remember, it's also internal threats. They're in the house, right? Plus, you can ensure compliance. Increasingly important, isn't it? By seamlessly securing hybrid work, your organization doesn't have to sacrifice productivity for security. And with a single unified platform, say goodbye to those 28 different solutions that don't talk to one another. Lookout reduces IT complexity, gives you more time to focus on whatever else is coming your way. Don't take your eye off the ball. Just use Lookout. Good data protection. It shouldn't be a cage. It's a springboard, letting you and your organization bound toward the future of your making. That's why you need to go to lookout.com today. Learn how to safeguard your data, how to secure hybrid work, how to reduce IT complexity. You can do it all with one tool, lookout.com. You owe it yourself to pay them a visit. Lookout.com. We thank them for supporting Windows Weekly. And if they ask, just tell them, I heard it on Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell, that's where I heard it. I know all about it. All right, Microsoft. I guess we should do Windows 11 first. That's the big boy. Anything new?
Yeah, nothing major. We could actually rip through most of this pretty quickly. So the big one is that, and I actually, since I wrote these notes, I published a story about this. So Microsoft used to release, let me see if I can get this right. They used to release preview and optional updates on what we call is week D, right? The fourth, usually last week of the month. Not every month. That would happen 2, 3, maybe several times a year, but not every month. Starting sometime in the past couple of months, they switched this to week. I'm sorry. See, I got it backwards. It was week C. Originally, sorry, that was the third week. Now they've moved to week D. So week D is ideally located an equidistance from each week B of the previous and the next month, right? The idea being that halfway between every patch Tuesday, there's a week D, and that's where they can release an optional or preview update. And so what they've kind of formalized over the past couple of months is every month, basically. The only time they haven't done it since last September is January. We're going to release a preview update of the next Patch Tuesday feature update, small f. And so they just did that this week. So the first time this kind of entered my radar was back in February. February was when they released the preview version. It was February, I think it was February 28th, was the preview update of the Moment 2 update that they released on Patch Tuesday in March, right? Subsequently, they did it again, and now they've done it again. And now I've gone back and looked, and actually I found that, like I said, every month except for one time since September, they've been doing this. They've shifted the schedule a little bit between week D and week C. But
having the 2 week spacing off of Patch Tuesday is good.
Yeah, that's the new thing, right?
Yeah.
So this is interesting, right? not this update. The update they just released is not that interesting, actually, right? The one big thing that you can see if you install it is if you go to Windows Update now, there's a new option under the check for updates button that says get the latest updates as soon as they're available, and you can click it on. And when you do that, you'll actually get the latest. This is how it describes it: non-security updates, fixes, and improvements as they roll out. In other words, when they release a preview version of one of these updates, you'll just get it. They won't have to ask you to take it, and you won't have to agree to it. Interesting. So if you're, it's kind of a strange positioning here, but if you're an early adopter, but want to stay on stable, don't want to put your machine, don't want to enroll it in the Windows Insider program, this is a way to ensure that you're automatically going to get these updates as soon as they come out, rather than having to wait for the stable release on Patch Tuesday.
The latest clip champ.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So there again, I'm always trying to understand what they're doing because they never explain it clearly. But they have said every year we're going to release a new feature update, capital F, capital U, right? Feature update, a version upgrade. Version upgrades are unique in the scheme of things because they don't all roll out at once to everybody, right? They slowly roll them out to the community based on compatibility, et cetera, et cetera. The 22H2 update didn't fully roll out, I think, until I think it was February. It took a long time, maybe March. That's how those things go. That's the only thing that makes them unique. But between each feature update, they release cumulative updates. Some of them are security updates and some of them non-security updates. And these days with Windows 11, most of them include new features.
I'm glad you brought this up because I've been a little confused by something on my screen. I did Patch Tuesday when I got back.
Yep.
And then still to be done is this cumulative update preview.
Yes, that's the update that just came. It must say it's April, right? It says 2023. Yeah. So this is the update I'm just describing. If you install this, what you will get is that option I just described, the ability to start getting these updates automatically.
It's very good. I mean, the cumulative update preview, I'm not because I'm not an insider anymore, thank God.
So you're unstable.
What do I want a preview of anything for? I don't.
Why I can't help you with, but what I can tell you. I really can't.
They really don't explain what I'm going to get here. But okay, so should I do it?
That I can help you with. So think about the schedule, right? So the second Tuesday of every month is Patch Tuesday. The second Tuesday of April was the 12th.
Yeah.
Right. So
I wasn't
12th
here.
we got.
So when I come home, it's install. I'm installing it. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
That came with by the way, came with some new features. Okay. 2 weeks later, this past Tuesday, yesterday. I'm sorry, it was the 11th. I'm looking at the wrong day. Two weeks later was yesterday, the 25th.
Yeah.
That's week D. This is when they shipped that thing that you're seeing, which is the preview update. It's the preview version of the Patch Tuesday update that's going to come out 2 weeks later.
Oh, and you don't need to be an insider for this. This is a preview.
Yeah. So the difference between a normal update, if you will, a normal
understand my confusion
update.
Here.
Oh, I am making a career out of your.
Do they think that? Do they think that people don't ever go to Windows Update, so they'll never see this, so it doesn't matter?
Well, okay. So again, you're introducing an interesting conundrum. So they have. There's
an info button that does nothing, which is great.
It's not going to give you anything. So you have to just go off what I'm going to tell you. So
okay.
The idea here is that I don't think the Windows Insider program has enough engagement. I think this is part of the problem. So they've kind of formalized this notion of let's get this stuff out into the world, and we're going to split the difference, between Patch Tuesdays. We'll do preview versions of these updates. It will give us a couple of weeks of more volume of people testing this update, and who knows? Maybe we'll fix some problems. The thing is, if you're not installing Windows updates, you're not looking at Windows updates, so you wouldn't even know that this thing is available. Nor would you install it, right? So that's okay because 2 weeks from today, 2 weeks from yesterday, this will go out to stable. So you will eventually get it, whether you choose to get it or not. The difference between this and 2 weeks from now is you have to choose to take it now.
And right? I don't see the incentive. In 2 weeks, it'll be in your box anyway.
Yeah, so the incentive is, this is what I mean, it's a little strange. You're enthusiastic enough about this that you want to do this, but not enough to put your computer in the Windows Insider program.
Right.
That's so weird.
It's like there's a fifth channel now. It's like the stable preview channel, if you will. Like I'm just making up but that's what this is. Yeah. So we know from right before Windows 11 22H2 shipped last September/October, because again, we're doing a preview stable release thing. That's weird, but whatever. The rumors emerged of something called these moment updates, right? And the way the story went was the first moment update is going to come out in October/November, because again, preview then regular. And that was the one that included like the the tabs in File Explorer and some other stuff. And then the second moment update was supposed to come out in February, well, March, but February 28th was the preview version. And that included, who knows, whatever that had, whatever it had in it. But you know what? I've gone back and looked. They've shipped new features every single month.
Wow.
Except for January, because January is after December, and December is when Microsoft is off for half of the month, and they didn't release a preview release that month, so they just didn't do one in January.
I wonder if we're just being experimented on. I wonder if they're considering the idea of cutting the insider program substantially, and so that, and if they can show that, hey, if there's a certain number of people who are going to install this preview no matter what. We don't have to put them in any program.
Yeah, but nobody knows what they're doing when they say install this. It's not.
There's no downside to Windows for that.
Hold on. So they don't know. You're right. But the thing, what you're not seeing is what happens after you install it. So now when you go to Windows Update, there's a new option at the top of the window. And it says, get the latest updates as soon as they're available.
So I'm going to install this. Kind of blind, because no one really has told me what's going to happen here. But now you're telling me, thank goodness. And this is why, folks, I just want to remind you listen to this show, because otherwise, what does this mean?
Yes. And so the thing, but this time they're actually documenting it here. So unlike what you see, they're actually documenting
from now on.
No, there's a link. You can click it, and it goes to a website, and it tells you what this means. They've actually said, this is what this will
Once
do.
I install this one, from now on, it will
is
do
optional.
This.
It's a preview.
Right.
It's not,
Right. Okay.
And it, by the way, introducing, I don't want to call this a new term, but it's a Microsoft. So I wrote an article today called Continuous Innovation, which is Microsoft's term for these monthly updates, right? The actual term for this internally is controlled feature rollout.
Oh.
And you know what? It's almost not worth getting into the weeds on it. I'll just say that, I already said it. We're going to do a feature update, capital F, capital U, once a year. But Microsoft, we reserve the right every month between now and then to release other features. And they have like I said, every month.
This got to be more than that, though. This thing is it's only 7% in 30 or seconds or a minute or so.
Listen, the amount of time it takes to reboot is going to confuse you even further. But yes, at the end of the day, when this thing is done,
it's just a switch.
Basically, the only thing you're going to notice is the switch. I'm not saying there isn't more. I'm just saying it's the only thing you're going to notice. I know.
God bless you, Microsoft. I mean, look, I download updates almost daily on Linux without paying any attention to what I'm getting.
Of course.
So I guess it's silly of me to ask more from Microsoft, but okay.
I think you both asked, or maybe it was just Leah, but somebody asked why. I can't help you with why. I can tell you what.
Why? And why Microsoft? Why? Yeah. No one knows why.
No, I think they're experimenting.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That team's trying to find its way.
You think it's an A/B test, maybe? And like, does it? But everybody,
I think they're playing because everyone gets it.
Yeah.
So, so by the way, you know what was an A/B test? We talk about this endlessly because this is the perfect example. Although there are others, by the way. The search pill, right? That came out in October/November.
Mm-hmm.
The issue with the search pill, actually, one of the issues with the search pill was that not everyone got it. We kind of forget this now. A few months have gone by. But because I'm writing a book and I have so many computers and I'm upgrading them all, there was a period of time where most of my computers didn't have it. Some did. And then eventually most of my computers had it, but one or two didn't. And then eventually it all had it. And then March came and they just wiped it out because they came up with a whole new interface. But that was a really good example of them shipping an update they had never tested with the Insider program. It had bugs, regression, no longer did the flyover or jump list of previous searches. And then they just replaced it a few months later. And it's like, guys, why don't you just test this thing for a couple of months? Give it to the insiders. They would have seen this. They would have said, this is the problem. Pay attention, But I really, Richard's right. They're They're just doing things in different ways now. Sometimes they throw it out in stable. Sometimes they skip the whole progression through the Insider program and they'll just throw something right in beta or right in release preview.
Well, I don't know there's anybody left that was from the original Insiders program internally.
Yeah.
And so I just don't know that they value it anymore. You know, Microsoft tends to want to make new things.
It's like it was bring your kid to school or work day, and then the parents all went home and the kids stayed. Now they're just running the show. I don't know what's happening over there. It's very, very strange.
Well, I'm still installing this, which all it adds apparently is a feature to the menu, but it's still going. So,
well, here's the good news, Leo. Unlike the thing you did early last summer when you got your Dell XPS,
that was a big
15,
mistake.
I think it was.
Yeah. Which is now running Linux because I couldn't get rid of it.
We fixed it. Yeah, they finally did the window, but it took them a long time. This thing that you're changing now will not harm you, right? It won't.
And would you recommend?
It's not irreversible.
Once I get this thing, would you recommend that I say, give me those feature updates, whatever you want?
Recommend is a strong term. The concern. Assume it's going to stay. I guess the concern
sooner or later is going to be a bad preview. Inevitably, it's a preview.
That's the thing, and I'm also. I guess my other word.
It really is kind of a quasi insider ring.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
yeah.
It is, yeah.
They should bill it as
5.
So
it's.
They should say these are beta.
Oof, man. Yeah, that's oof. You don't want to go there.
That's a harsh word, isn't it? That's
the way they so back in. February, March. I don't remember. It was probably March by the time they documented it. There was actually a post to the tech community blog that explained this new switch to week D for the preview slash what's the other term? Optional update thing. And they explained why they did it and blah 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 and everything. But they called it production quality. They said that, it's reached some bar, like they felt, supposedly. But look, they delivered that search bill without any testing, so that's the quality bar. I mean, it's,
right?
They've certainly, but we complained about Paint a couple of weeks ago, whenever that was, a month ago. That still has never been fixed. That issue that I raised about the Paint app, so quality is not job one, from what I can tell.
Well, look at how many ways they mess with the big B icon.
Yes.
And how quickly they did it.
That's right.
And how little you were involved in it.
That's another great example. The Edge 111, when they added the B icon and everyone freaked out. And then even though, I think a new version of Edge comes out, every 3 weeks, is it? Or
yeah, 4? No. But that string, it was like 3 in less than a week.
Yeah. They added a bunch of new features. And then so many people, businesses complained. I think it was a week later, they said, okay, we'll let you remove it. And we're going to bury it in the UI. We're not going to make it easy, but they actually did. The point behind that wasn't to let users remove it. The point was to give people businesses a policy they could use to remove it.
Yeah.
Which they did. Okay. I just said we're going to blow through.
Yeah. You said this would be fast.
The rest of this is going to be fast.
Okay. Sure. Whatever you say.
So, again, some time ago, a month or two ago, Microsoft announced that Phone Link would be updated to support iOS or iPhone, and that is now starting to roll out to everyone. So that's hit stable, or has started to hit stable. The chances are still, it could be weeks before a lot of people see it. I just checked today. I don't see it on any of my computers yet, but
I use it with my Samsung, so I kind of want it to.
Yeah.
But that's Phone Link for Android.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Phone Link for Android.
This is for iOS. Oh,
right. Yeah. For iOS.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that hit stable pretty quick. There was a new beta channel. Well, they do 2 builds, right? But 2 new beta channel builds since the last show. Nothing major there. There's only no new features, but they added some languages to the live caption feature, which is fantastic. Live caption is one of those features I want to say debuted in 22H2, if I'm not mistaken. Or in one of the moment updates. I don't know. I can't keep track of this stuff anymore. I think it was 22H2. It doesn't matter.
I love live caption. Everybody's doing that now, though. It's table
live
space.
caption everywhere. Yep, that's one of the great reasons to use an Android phone. Or at least a Pixel
iPhone
phone.
does it too. Yeah.
Yeah, does it? Okay.
Every time I talk to my mom on FaceTime, I gotta try to figure out how to turn it off. I don't want it.
Yeah.
But
it's really
if you can't hear or you want to watch a video in bed and you don't want to wake your spouse, this is great.
Yeah, no, our son is deaf, obviously, so we have always used captions wherever we can. And the thing that's interesting about captions is whether you have hearing loss or not, you start to rely on them. And the way they make TV shows and movies today, everything's so dark and explosions are loud and voices are low. I mean,
I can't watch a
I
TV show
think
without
more and more
captions.
people are turning captions on wherever they can.
Oh yeah, even
you know?
young people who have good hearing. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's just a nice thing to have. And then this one's only a leak, so Microsoft has not announced this, but it's coming in some future non-security update, monthly update, whatever we're going to call these things. They are adding back features to the taskbar that were regressions from the original version of the Windows 11 taskbar, specifically app labels and groups, like icon groups, right? One of many, many features that got lost in the or I guess two of many, many features that got lost in the transition to Windows 11. So that's
bit by bit, the same taskbar.
Yep. And this is the prediction I made when Windows 11 first shipped. I was so freaked out that they announced this thing in June, shipped it in October. No feedback went into the product whatsoever. Everyone was, freaking, including me. And I said, mark my words, they can't, this beautiful, simple looking thing.
It went so well for Windows 8,
Yeah, exactly. They're going to keep, so at least the one thing Windows 8 had going for it was that it just took those features away, right? Windows 11 has the same features, but they do less. So everyone, it's a different kind of freak out. But my guess at the time, and it's being proven correct over time, is that they'll just keep adding these features back until at the end we're back at Windows 11, Windows 10 again. I don't. There's more to do, but they're adding that stuff back, so that's good.
Okie dokie.
All right. See, I told you I could.
Now you breeze through that.
Yeah.
What's not breezing through that is this update, which is still.
Yeah, I know. No, I know. I noticed the same thing. It
churning
takes a long
along.
Time. I know. Yeah, I don't know why, but it does.
It's almost as if they're doing more than they say.
The offline bit where it reboots, that takes a long time too. It's very strange.
I just pressed the restart button, so I'll be back in about an hour. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, but you'll see when you get back. We'll take a look at it. Yeah. So after this next two segments,
this is the screen now. We're just going to watch this the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, just leave it there. That's
Actually,
good.
It's moving along. That's pretty quick.
Yeah, sure. No, sure. You'll be fine.
So, as soon as you said that, it stopped.
We'll get to like 96%, and then it will say reverting.
That's it. We get to 19, then starts going back down again. That's great.
Why is it so hard? This is a completely peripheral conversation, but why is it so hard to do progress bars? It's just unpredictable.
Because they're not accurate. Yeah, that's why they don't do them anymore. Microsoft doesn't. I mean,
but I get a percentage, which is basically a text progress
Suddenly
bar.
you're at 21, right?
Yeah.
They're just guessing. There's steps, and you try and granularize the steps.
Yeah,
you don't really know. Look, you get the 21%, and then it restarted.
It went away.
Well, now that I've written,
we'll put it back because it's not done.
I've written a fifth of what you wanted to do. Now I'm going to reboot your machine. It's
going to come back and say 15%.
Yeah.
Let's see what it says.
Well, it's just sitting there, right? Oh, whoa. Yeah. Hey, we're going now.
Yep.
That was a full reboot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, this little switch in the UI is apparently some kind of a BIOS feature because
it's taking a while.
It takes a while. Yeah. It takes a while. This is what happens.
I do want to get into this unbundling of Teams and the whole. Is Microsoft being untrustworthy?
You're right.
And like
it went back to 7%.
It went down. I know.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Listen, I've been there. I know how this works. It's not good.
But we had made progress, you and I.
I literally said, so this is the first time I said out loud the first time I saw this. Did that just go down? I have never seen that happen before.
We have proof.
I used to code those all the time that only ran on April 1st.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I'm like this. It's taking a long time, so I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, wasn't this number bigger? Yeah.
Oh, so restarting again. That's the second reboot.
Got to 30 this time.
This one I think will go into your desktop. I think that's all it has to do.
Only 30% of it though.
It's a long.
As far as you know, all this is doing is adding an item to the update screen. Except
the only thing I'm going to admit to, Leo, is that the only thing most people are going to notice is that it has added this one switch to the settings.
So maybe there's big security updates. It is a full reboot, by the way. I'm seeing the BIOS.
It is literally a non-security update.
Yeah.
It's like there are no security updates.
But then, of course, it's not like they always comply with their own rules.
They don't say sometimes. Yeah. I mean, Apple often will do a security update without saying. Because you don't want to telegraph what you're up to the bad guys.
Okay. All right. I appreciate I like that you guys think there's a strategy here.
Back to 30%, kids. We're here.
Oh, I was wrong. Jeez.
Rolling along.
It takes a long time. takes a long time. All right. So while this is happening, I'll just point out that the Financial Times reported this week that Microsoft has agreed to stop bundling Microsoft Teams with its Office suite to avoid an EU antitrust investigation, which
what does that
is
even
interesting.
mean?
I know that's the thing. I literally, so I wrote a follow up to this article where I kind of, what does that mean? I literally, that's the, in the notes, it's, does Microsoft have an antitrust problem? Right. So it's like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Right. So I looked up a few things. First of all, some of the language here I think is a little incorrect. I think what they're really talking about here are Microsoft 365 subscriptions, where you download the Office suite from Microsoft, right? Because you're a paying subscriber and you get the classic desktop apps. And I actually do have a commercial account and I have a personal account, obviously. I typically just use the personal account. I don't have any great reason for that. I think it's just because most PCs come with Office, so I sign in. And what that means to me is I have to go download the Teams client manually. That's my experience. So
there it is.
In my brain,
get the latest updates as soon as they're available.
Oh, there it is. But you can click on it, learn more, and
everything's starting up. So I can learn more here.
You can learn more.
Thank goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
You should have told me before I installed it.
Listen. 100%.
You did your best. You did your best, Paul.
Well, but the point here is that this update will eventually be mandatory, so you're going to get this whether you want it or not. So,
yeah.
I mean,
give us 2 weeks.
Yeah. So anyway, so I looked into this, and what I found, I actually asked Mary Jo about this. I was a little confused. In March 2019, so not like a month ago and not a year ago, but 4 years ago, if you download the Office Desktop suite from your workplace's Microsoft 365 account, it actually does install Teams, right? And it adds Teams to existing setups that had done this previously before they were requiring this. I'm assuming a lot of that's running out. I mean, it's probably all new stuff. So the reason Microsoft has this potential or actually not EU, is it EU? Yeah, no, it is EU. I thought it was UK, but EU issue is that Slack, back when it was a standalone company, filed an antitrust complaint against Microsoft with the EU in July 2020. So over a year after this policy.
And a year before they got acquired.
Yep, by Salesforce. Yeah.
Right.
And man, the original complaint is fascinating. I remember reading this at the time and thinking, this is really inflammatory. It's very interesting. So this is some of the language they use. Microsoft has illegally tied its Teams product into its market dominant Office productivity suite, force installing it for millions, blocking its removal, and hiding the true cost to enterprise customers. So I thought let's break that down. Okay. First of all, market dominant Office productivity suite is a slightly outdated term. I don't know that a lot of people are buying Office on a Best Buy shelf, installing it with a disk, and that's how they acquire things. Like to me, when I hear that, you're describing some kind of an old way of doing things. They are force installing it. So in the same way that they're force installing OneNote, when you install Office, if you acquire it through a Microsoft 365 commercial subscription. So yes, okay. Blocking its removal, though, that was an interesting one. So I brought that up at the beginning of the show. I looked into this, and as it turns out, if you install Teams this way, and you then go and uninstall Teams, it will come back. And that's because, and this is the tip, you have to also uninstall something called the Teams machine-wide installer. And yes, that's the name of it. If you don't do that, that's the thing that keeps reinstalling Teams. So you have to uninstall two things, then whatever. But
right.
And then what was the third bit? Hiding the true cost to enterprise customers. Hiding the true cost. That's fascinating. Because that suggests that they are expressing the cost of this thing to their customers in some other way, right? In other words, you thought you were getting this thing for free as part of this other thing you're paying for, but actually we're charging you for it over here.
Right.
I don't think that the enterprise customers give a flying anything about the true cost of anything. What they care about is what they're paying for. And I think one of the most fascinating things about Microsoft 365, we talked about this, is this notion of when you pay for this thing, you get a bunch of stuff that you don't even know is there. And by force installing Teams, they're putting it in front of you. You know, the businesses that are giving you Microsoft 365 as a user are paying for this thing, and they probably want you to use it. You know, for one thing,
Yep.
they're
Well,
probably,
more importantly, they don't want to spend money on something else
that's
when they
right.
already own a product, and we could debate whether better or worse.
Yep. Yep.
Already.
There was a, I don't know if I can find this quickly, but there was a really interesting quote that relates to this from Satya Nadella. Yeah. During the conference call last night about the earnings. This is what he said. By the way, no one asked about this. He just said this about he said it. Someone asked a question about, it seems like Office is a really big user base. How do you keep growing this business? Amy Hood answered it, had a very long thing to say. And then he said this: fundamentally, what we're focused on is making sure that the customers are able to derive the value of our offerings, whether it's the Microsoft 365 suite value, which is significant, whether it's E3 or E5, which are the higher end tiers of Microsoft 365. We want to make sure that they're getting deployed, that they're getting used. And that's obviously going to lead to our share gains in many cases. So in other words, he directly tied the notion of customers understanding all of the stuff that they get that they're paying for already, and that the more they use that stuff, the more their share of this market is going to gain, which is exactly what Slack does not want.
Right.
Right. So, okay. Does Slack, I guess the question here is, does Slack have some kind of a case? Is there a case to be made that Microsoft has a monopoly, that they are abusing that monopoly to harm a competitor in this case? And there's a lot of other crazy language, like Microsoft wants 100% of the money, you know, that kind of stuff.
Would it be similar to the case Netscape had against Internet Explorer?
I'm glad you said that. That's exactly what I compared it to. So yes, it would be. And what you find is that the same thing happened. The question is whether there's something illegal happening. So from a technical standpoint, yes, Microsoft
DOJ did say there was something illegal in this case.
Well, but we have to look at the technical aspect here, right? So we also have to, well, we have to determine if Office has a monopoly, right? I mean, so but just from what they did technically, so to speak, is they had this dominant product, Windows or Office. They saw a competitor, Netscape / Slack, and they said, we got to respond to that competitor. How do you want to do it? Let's offer to buy them first. First they offered to buy them. They tried to buy both, right? They were going to.
Yep. They did.
Okay, that's not going to work. All right, so let's just, Bill Gates in this case said, hey guys, we already have everything we need to beat Slack. Let's just build our own thing. And they made Teams. When Teams shipped initially, yeah, it was kind of a Slack clone, right? It was chat-based instant messaging, right? It was basically the same thing. Microsoft then did to Teams what they did to IE. They turned it into a platform and they made a better product. Yeah. By the time IE beat Netscape, it wasn't because it was bundled with Windows. It was because it was a better product.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I was there.
People forget that part of it, Yeah. And Teams today, better, it's a much more complete product. It does more things. It's a complete platform. Yeah. And like I said during the earnings call bit, it's also a complete ecosystem, right? Are there small businesses or individuals at companies that want to use Slack? Yeah, maybe. I mean,
we use Slack. We still use Slack.
Okay.
There's also a stickiness once we pay for Office, but there's a stickiness.
You use both. Yeah.
Because once you've got invested into a platform.
Thank you. That cuts exactly to my point, which is, does Microsoft's bundling of Teams, well, one of my points, foreclose Slack or any other competitor from competing in this market? And you just made the case that no, it does not, right? You find value in paying for and using Slack, and so you do, right? Now, not everyone can make that decision. I think a lot of companies would look at this and say, guys, we're paying for this thing. We're going to use it. That would be a problem if the thing you were paying for and using was less good or whatever. It was not as good.
Right.
But I think most of these companies, and Microsoft's really big in the Fortune 500. They're probably not as big in the smaller businesses or whatever, but would tell you that this product is in fact better.
Yeah. The other question is, are they going after the market? Like, is there a Slack importer?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think there is.
But what do you think about this notion of some version of Office, whatever you want to call it, Office, the suite, Office, Microsoft 365? Does this thing have a monopoly in the same way that Microsoft did with Windows in 1995 to 2005 or whatever?
No, because Google Docs is almost equally as big. One would argue they were bigger for a time there, and now M365 is doing very well. But
yeah, I would say so.
There are other products in the market, But
Yeah.
Google doesn't offer a quote collaboration tool.
The thing that was unique about Windows at that time was that it was the only way you could access anything related to personal computing for the most part. There was a Mac that was doing poorly,
Yeah.
and there was no mobile, right? There were no smart TVs or smart devices. There was nothing else. So Windows was personal computing.
Mhm.
I could make a case that Microsoft 365 Office, whatever you want to call it, is the best productivity solution. But the truth is, we live in an age where we're using Notion.
Yeah.
I pay for
When
Microsoft
we're not happy with the
365,
solution, we do go to
and
alternatives.
I use Notion. There are lots
Yeah.
of free and low cost solutions that meet certain needs. I
Mm-hmm.
talk a lot about Markdown editors and note takers and things like that. I use Visual Studio Code to write in Markdown, which is crazy. It's a Microsoft product, but my Office doesn't have the same dominant
No.
force.
But they're
over
also
the
not
industry that
doing the
Windows
same
did.
things. Like if you go back to the original antitrust, even before the IE one,
Right.
Microsoft originally sold, basically made a deal with PC manufacturers. It says the only way you get to buy Windows is that you tell us how many PCs you sell and we give you a rate.
Yeah,
You are
right.
basically
Yeah,
paying
yeah.
for every PC no matter what. If you put another OS on it, you're still paying us. And then they said, if you don't put Office on, then Windows is this much more.
Right.
Or you can also include Office. And that was pretty anti-competitive for a market dominant product already. And then the IE thing came in, which, let's face it, the IE thing only happened because Gates lipped off the Senate Senate committee,
sure.
right?
Sure.
Like I guarantee you, Zuckerberg and everybody else watches those videos from August of.
Oh my God, it's like a business case study. Yeah, exactly.
Don't ever do this.
But right, I mean, yeah, 100%. You were talking earlier about things Intel does right. I mean, Intel got sued for antitrust in the EU 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was. And because of what happened to Microsoft, they just settled immediately. They're like, we're not going through this.
No.
We're going to pay the fine. And by the way, the fine actually got rescinded years later. They appealed the fine part of it, but they changed their business practices to accommodate the EU, which actually is another important point here. What is it that Slack wants here? Like, what's the goal and what's the precedent? One of the things that the EU did to Microsoft as part of the antitrust case there, they had a browser ballot.
Windows.
So the idea was you bring up Windows and they say, hey, look, here are 5 browsers. Which one do you want to use? Is there a world in which there's a ballot for chat-based whatever? And I would sort of make the argument that because Slack doesn't do everything Teams does, there's nothing else that could sit next to Microsoft Teams.
Yeah.
It would have to be a roll-your-own suite of things like Borland used to do, where they teamed up with some other company to bring all the products in that would make it sort of like Microsoft Office, because no one company offered all of that stuff.
No. And Teams does more than you even realize. I mean, if you create a group inside of Teams that matches up with a group name inside of SharePoint, it's an interface over SharePoint. Like literally you have access to the same docs, you can write through it. Like there's so many things that they've deeply embedded into Teams now that good luck. It's got serious advantages.
Right. 100%. And the problem for Slack ultimately is it kind of doesn't matter what happens here. Imagine Microsoft decoupled these things, whatever that means. Teams has 300 million users now, guys.
Yeah.
It is, as it's just come up a couple of times. It's a platform and it is an ecosystem, right?
And they've already and they're talking about doing it again. It's like, what do you mean exactly? Like, what does that?
Well,
mean?
the language is confusing. That might be partially because the person who wrote it doesn't understand how Office is deployed to businesses or whatever. I can't explain that part of it. But
well, the other thing is, it's not like Slack's going out of business. They're owned by Salesforce. They're not a little company struggling for survival anymore. Well, they got sold for what, $28 billion.
Thank you. Actually,
all their leaders have done just fine.
I didn't even put this in my article. I forgot about this. The other parallel between Netscape and this is that during Microsoft's antitrust trial in the United States, Netscape got acquired by AOL.
Right.
Really undercutting the case. If your situation was so dire, why were you such a valuable asset for this other company?
Right.
So same thing with Slack. I don't know that the EU would be swayed by that. They seem to be really into the little guys, but although Salesforce, not a little guy.
No. And neither was Slack. $28 billion.
Yeah. Actually, I think that was the biggest problem with Microsoft acquiring Slack was the amount of money.
Yeah.
I think, if it had been half that, I think Microsoft would have paid it just to make them go away.
Why don't companies consider, there's so many, if it's just messaging you want, and I think Microsoft understands that's a commodity feature. There's so many other free choices out there. I don't understand. Do companies really need the other features that Teams offers? Is that why?
Need is, I think the issue really, honestly, it's the Microsoft double-edged sword. The strength of Teams in many ways, generally speaking, is the integration, right? Richard was just saying it's really just a front end to SharePoint, which is correct. This is another way for people who work in an organization or are on a team or working on a project, whatever it is, to collaborate on whatever it is, a set of documents, a presentation, or whatever. And that where that thing is, we're kind of hiding that from the user because they're just looking in the files tab in Teams. They don't really care where it's stored up in SharePoint.
Yeah.
Who would?
We don't worry about file hierarchies anymore. It just happens. Teams does that for you.
Yeah. I mean, in the old days, we would round robin these things like Word docs and stuff in Outlook via email, and that's stupid. This is a way to have a live document sitting up in a file share somewhere. Again, SharePoint, but people don't know or care.
And even when you do email that document to someone, Exchange Online sees that it came from SharePoint, flips it to a link, and then you're actually working on the original version with version control and all that good stuff.
By the way, the integration continues because Loop's coming down the pike, and Loop will be a way
doing even more
to do more of that live editing inside the document or create new types of documents and blah, 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 on and on it goes. I mean, Microsoft has just taken this thing and run with it, and Slack is like, hey, we're still doing chat-based, good for you. People find value in that. That's great. But I don't know that these things are direct competitors anymore.
They've moved away from that. And all of the voice integration stuff, the video stuff, like they've done a lot. Right. It's one would argue it's too many things, but
Slack does that now too. I mean, Slack's trying to keep parity.
So you guys, you said you use Slack, right? For example. So there's nothing about Microsoft Office that makes it difficult or impossible for you folks to share document formats through Slack, right? There's nothing, it's not like Microsoft has engineered Office to make that a worse experience.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that. That doesn't
You're looking for the smoking gun, Yeah,
and
I think Richard's right. There's a reason Microsoft never made a Slack importer. They're very carefully, navigating around that.
They realized they needed that product space. They decided to try and buy before build. They weren't able to buy, so they built.
Yeah. I don't know why, all I could say is the stickiness of it. You have a lot of history in Slack. And because, all of our conversation history is there, I tried, before Slack, by the way, we were using, God, now I've forgotten because it got acquired.
Oh, that was the thing. Right. So there were other chat-based collaboration solutions.
Yeah.
One was called something like Hot or Hip.
Atlassian owned it. HipChat.
HipChat, maybe?
Yeah, I think that was it.
No,
anyway,
so
we were using that.
People ask,
fortunately, when Atlassian sold it or whatever, or got acquired.
I think they sold it to Slack.
Yeah, there was a tool to import. So it was,
Slack
we were able to move, but
no, you're right.
I've tried over and over again to get Lisa, because Lisa's the decision maker, to get her to move to Matrix or something free.
Right.
No. Although for a long time we had the free tier only of Slack, and we hit a limit. Sure. And without telling her, I just started paying.
That's how they get you.
She probably doesn't even know it's not free anymore. But I mean, you need. How much
does Slack cost per user?
It's a few $100 a month, I think. I don't remember. Oh,
for the whole.
It's probably per user. Yeah, for us, I think it's a few $100 a month. But and it's not because it's like 50 users or something at most. I don't know. I think there are other. I would love to use Teams. I think there are other things. There is a stigma against using Teams.
Sure.
You look. We're a tech company, right? So Slack was hip and with it, and the smart thing to do as a tech company. You're with all your other.
Yeah, but so here's the problem with that. You're right. But what that thing is changes all the time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know. It's not that way anymore.
Problem. Yeah, that's the problem.
Pretty soon it'll look like we're old hat.
Well, I mean, in other words, the hot hip solution that is whatever to do this.
It'll never be Teams. I'm sorry, but I hate to tell you this.
No, I'm not saying
Microsoft will never be cool.
But the thing that will always be there and work and just be there is Teams.
Right.
Like,
No, you're right.
And I don't have it yet, but they've, apparently improved the client dramatically in this new version. So,
well, yeah, if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, then you have Teams. If you're not in the Microsoft system, getting into it for Teams is not any fun.
Sure.
And
that's interesting. I don't think we have Microsoft for everybody. Most people were still using Google Docs. You know what's interesting? Google does not have a competitor in this space.
Right. Which is weird, right?
They completely fumbled it. They used to.
Does he still? The guy who used to run Microsoft 365 went to run Google Docs, but I feel like he might have left.
So inept. Google. I've never seen a company.
It's weird to me that they didn't.
Future since Xerox. Like this. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They had Hangouts and then they kind of split it into chat and Meet.
Yeah. Right. Now, Google made a mess of that. I pay for a Zoom account for all the folks
as we do. Yeah.
Yeah. My wife actually pays for one for her work too.
Yeah. We're happy with Zoom. Does Zoom do all that stuff? Could we use Zoom?
No.
Nobody uses Zoom for chat. Do they? Right? I mean, I don't think so.
Zoom is for video conversations. For recording
Microsoft learned that lesson with Skype, right? They thought everybody used Skype for chat.
Well, and people use Skype for I used Skype for a long time to make shows, and then eventually people saying, "Oh, Skype, yeah, I think I have that."
Yeah.
Wait, it's updating.
You've changed to Zoom as we did, and actually, Zoom has given us a much better result.
Well, Richard, I speak for you, but you obviously have everything, right?
Yes,
so you can meet people where they are. But most people understand Zoom.
I love it because I'll look at Lisa's computer at home, and every one of these installs a menu. She's on a Mac menu bar item. So she's got like blue jeans. What is this thing? Blue jeans? What is that? She's got like her menu bar is full of all, because as she's doing sales, she has to meet with whatever the client wants to meet with.
Wherever they are. Yeah.
We use Meet internally, Google Meet. Yep. Occasionally we'll have to do a Teams meeting.
I think what I do.
Last time I used Teams was when I told Premiere I was quitting. So
we use Meet for hands on Windows, actually.
Yes. What?
Right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. No, wait, do we?
No, we use Zoom, I promise you.
Oh, is it Zoom? Maybe it's Zoom.
Yeah, okay, But if you met with us, it would be Meet.
I feel like it's Meet. Oh, no, I guess you're right. I'm sorry. Sorry. Yep. Sorry.
And if they are, I'm going to go spank them.
Nope. Sorry. I'm getting confused.
No spanking required.
Zoom has really worked with us, by the way, in a way that Skype kind of tried to, but really never did well. And we have
Skype was always like, sometime in the future, we're going to have this thing for professional broadcasters.
Yeah,
just give us 6 more months.
We had Skype VX. We bought a big box. We had all this stuff.
The NDI.
And Zoom. But we get great quality out of Zoom. I'm so
happy. They went to NDI at the end of their life, right? There was a huge battle inside of Microsoft for all the different voice products.
Yeah.
They had UCS and others, and then it was over, right? Now it's basically consolidated around Teams. And Zoom grabbed onto that and ran with it, and good for them.
Zoom's done a good job.
Yep.
So is Teams the dominant? I guess it is. If with 300 million net monthly active users, it's got to be the dominant messaging platform in business messaging.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Is it business messaging?
Zoom's got to be in there,
but they don't do messaging.
Well, you can chat, right? I mean,
but
can.
Yeah. But do you have to start a Zoom meeting with somebody to chat with them? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah. True.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, you're right. I guess it must be, right? Certainly in the Fortune 500, it is.
I think so. And I'm trying to think what the competitor would be. It's not WhatsApp. It's not Discord. It's not Matrix.
It's not whatever nonsense Amazon has that no one even knows they have.
That's the funniest thing. Amazon has all these fairly compelling offerings that no one ever
even knows they exist. Yep, exactly. It's weird that Google has, like I said, Meet.
Amazon doesn't believe in advertising. And I just like to mention to all of our advertisers, you see? That's why you advertise. Makes a difference. People don't know, won't hear about it. You know who else doesn't believe in advertising? Elon Musk.
Yeah.
But he's got a way to do it, which is to offend everybody and get them to talk about it.
What was the worst explosion last week, SpaceX or Twitter?
Ow.
I'm sorry.
Folks. I'm sorry.
The crater under Starship is actually larger, but not by much.
Right. Oh, boy.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Teams really is the incumbent at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all the more reason to attack them.
Sure.
And you'd think Salesforce owning Slack would help build that up, but I don't think Slack's going anywhere. Nobody's adopting Slack.
I don't think so either. That's the weird thing. And when they bought them, you have to sort of think, what's the point, right? What are they going to do with this thing? And the point to me should have been to build this thing out and make it more competitive. And I feel like they've just kind of sat on it. I know they just released some new feature this week, actually, Canvas or something. But I just don't feel like it's got, compared to Teams. Teams is Teams has just exploded with functionality.
Yeah.
Pardon.
3 explosion metaphors in
the
one
good kind of explosion,
paragraph.
not the Elon kind.
Grammarly might complain at this point. Anything more to say about this before you get to the Xbox segment? Because we're all waiting with bated breath.
Well, the Xbox stuff, all the good stuff's gone. But yes, we can.
Next day on the good stuff's gone. I
mean, I could rant for more time.
No need. Let's launch something of our own. Xbox news.
Yeah, so just a couple small additional items other than the big one, right? Microsoft released the 8th world update for Microsoft Flight Simulator across PC and Xbox. This one is for Oceania and Antarctica.
Ooh, fun.
So more detailed.
Is that 8th or 13th?
Oh, you're right. It's 13th.
Yeah.
Thank you for that's awesome.
It's World Update X.
It's a Roman numeral, so
it's not V.
Oh God, that's great. I am an American. So more detailed imagery for Polynesia, Melanesia. That's where you get melanoma, I guess, and the Galapagos Islands, as well as key regions of Antarctica.
Oh, I'm
Not
going to
those
fly
parts
over
of
the
Antarctica
Galapagos.
that are just snow, but the key regions.
Yeah, key regions.
And just the ones with Starbucks in them.
Yeah, exactly.
If you really want to find out how much disk space you have on a computer, this Flight Simulator app, this is the one.
That's right.
It's stunning how much.
Do they have? They must have the whole world now, right? I mean, is there anything left?
Well, they're adding. So they have the world, but they're adding these. The point of these world updates is to add even more detailed imagery for key areas. So if you think of just an obvious example. Well, the one I flew around was in Egypt. Obviously, the pyramids are all very detailed in the city and the river and everything. They want the places you would want to fly because it's beautiful. They make a point of making it as realistic as possible. So
yeah,
it's fun.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They're really beautiful.
Yeah.
This one is a strangely appealing story to me.
Me too. I know what you mean.
It's kind of hard to explain. It sounds obvious at first, but it's actually kind of hard to explain. So Atari has acquired over 100 classic games from companies named Accolade, Infogrames, and Microprose.
I think it's Infogames, not Infogrames.
No, it's Grames.
Is it really?
Yeah, I've always been confused by that. It's Grames. So these games are all from the 1980s and 1990s. I know it doesn't make any sense.
I thought all these games are owned by Steam already. So I'm kind of stunned. Yeah.
So here's the thing. So Atari, the company Atari, is not the Atari from the 1970s, right? It's the brand has kind of moved along and whatever. But that's true of these other companies too. So like Accolade is a company formed of former Atari 2600 programmers, right, who were making games. There were a couple of companies like this, like Activision, Accolade, and Magic, right? The reason these companies were formed was because Atari would never give credit to the people who made their games.
Right.
And they were like, we want to put our names on these things, right? So the first of those was Activision. Activision exists today. Microsoft's trying to buy them, right? Completely different company. But Activision used to be like the guys who made like Pitfall and, games like that. So two of the co-founders of Activision eventually left that company and made Accolade. Accolade made some of my favorite games from the 1980s across Commodore 64 and the Amiga. And those guys started Accolade. Accolade was later renamed to Infogrames and eventually was also renamed to GTI, GT Interactive. That company, if you're like, I've heard of this company, it's because they were the guys that partnered with id on the retail releases of Doom 2 and Quake. So if you bought this thing in a box, it would have said GTI or GT Interactive on the outside. That company was acquired from Infogrames in 1999. Have fun following this story. Anyway, the point is, we don't know the full list of games, And the short list they provided, I've only heard of a couple of these, but the key one to me is Hardball, which is an amazing baseball game. Demolition Racer, which is a franchise. And then the Microprose games, 1942 Pacific Air War, F-117A, and F-14 Air Combat. That's some good stuff. These are classic games.
I had some friends who worked on the Hardball series.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. I love it. I played Hardball. I bet across at least 3 different platforms over the years, over many years ago. But yeah. So anyway, that's happening. That's cool. So Atari's trying to reinvent themselves. Obviously, I think embracing their classicness, if you will, is the right way to go. Obviously, they've had trouble trying to ship this new console, which probably was a huge mistake. Whatever. And then finally, and semi-related, I guess propping up the notion that the Steam Deck has done pretty well. Is it Asus? I think it's Asus, right? Yeah, Asus is launching something called the ROG Ally.
Oh, that's Republic of Games. That's their ROG.
There you go.
ROG is their.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This is a Steam Deck. It looks like Steam Deck, and it runs Windows 11. It's going to be powered by a new series of Ryzen processors from AMD. So continuing their custom processor trend like they've done for Xbox, etc. 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of PCIe Gen 4 SSD storage, blah, 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 blah. So the question here is going to be price. What's the price?
Sounds like maybe a little bit better than the Steam Deck, to be honest.
Well, I mean, it's newer, right? So 1080p, 120 hertz refresh rate, FreeSync.
Nice.
Nice. How much what would you weigh to get into this?
600. I'd pay $600. Yeah. Which is basically what the Steam Deck costs.
Yeah, I'm worried it's going to be more like $900.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, but either way, how do you compete with Steam Deck? You're too late to the market. You don't have the game roster that they've got.
That's true.
Like, good luck.
Unless you put Steam on it, it's Windows 11.
I was going to say, can you put? I mean, I assume you could put Steam on it, but yeah,
Steam Deck's a Linux box, which is interesting. They chose to go with Windows for this.
This one's Windows 11. So yeah, there was. While you were away, Leo, there was a rumor, and I chased this one down. It's not as exciting as it sounds, but supposedly at one point Microsoft was looking at I'm going to call it a game mode for Windows 10/11. And the idea was, in the same way that you have a tablet and you detach the keyboard, it goes into kind of a tablet mode, which is a little muted on Windows 11. The idea is you would install stock Windows 11 on this thing and it would go into a game mode because it detects the kind of computer it is. And the interface could be something simple with just a list of games. It could be the Xbox app, that kind of thing. Everyone got really excited about the imagery that came out of this, but it was all made by a Mac using intern that didn't even work at Microsoft. So
of course it was.
Don't get too excited about that, but whatever, who's since moved on. But anyway, interesting stuff. So this kind of machine, I do think I think portable gaming is big. I think this kind of thing could be big. And, Steam Deck obviously has done very well.
Has it? Is that obvious?
Okay. I feel like it's established. Okay. I will give it the same credit I give to the Surface Pro. It has established a form factor.
It's a form factor, yeah.
And and people are starting to copy it. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people look at the Nintendo
it's the Switch is what they're really.
And they think they're like, I like the idea of this thing, but I would like this to be a PlayStation, or I would like to be to play. Yeah, I think that's the deal there.
In general, you're cramming PC games into a smaller form factor, and not all games play
which is
well.
Unsuccessful.
I like that you called me unpopular. By the way, I read I'll read an article. Just the other day, I read an article I'm gonna make something up Manchego is a popular Linux distribution, and I stop right there and I go, is it?
Is it?
How do we?
It's a fine cheese, but
how are you defining the popularity of this Linux distribution that I have never heard of?
Popular amongst a certain
popular
group of people.
In what way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt the Switch is popular, and I would argue that's what they're copying.
Mm-hmm. But the Steam Deck is a more expensive device and a different kind of device. It's not going to get the battery life, obviously.
See, my problem is, and I played with the Steam Deck, and I didn't want it. We bought one, but I didn't really want to use it because it's too small a screen. If you've been used to playing PC games on a big screen, it's just not. Well, mobility is not
you're
that
our
important.
age, you're going to have to wear binoculars to read anything on this
What
thing.
is going on in there? I don't know.
Because the text on that thing is designed for a 27, 30-inch display.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's take a break. We have tips. We have picks. We have booze. And we have half an hour. So that should be adequate.
Should be exciting.
It should be exciting. Our show today brought to you by Collide. Collide, we've talked about them before. They're a device trust solution that ensures, and this is, as we're learning about various breaches, this is probably one of the most important things to protect yourself against. Unsecured devices getting into your network using your apps. As far as we can tell, this is what happened to LastPass, is that one of their DevOps people was at home and was using his laptop, and he had an unpatched version of, I think it was Plex on there, and that's how the bad guys got in. And then, of course, what does he do? This DevOps guy logs into LastPass, and the rest is history. I mean, you're talking big reputational costs as well as actual costs. Collide has some big news. If you're an Okta user, you're already kind of aware of this, and you're going, you have a really nice secure system, right? Well, Collide plus Okta. Now we're talking. Collide can get your entire fleet to 100% compliance. It patches one of the biggest holes in zero trust architecture, which is device compliance. I mean, it makes sense. Your identity provider will only, Okta will only let known devices log into the apps. But just because a device is known doesn't mean it is itself in a secure state. Plenty of the devices on your fleet really should not be trusted. Maybe they're running out-of-date OS versions. Maybe they've got unencrypted credentials lying around, or old browsers, or maybe they're running Plex from 2010. If a device isn't compliant or isn't running the Collide agent, doors shuts. It cannot access the organization's SaaS apps or other resources. Your zero trust architecture is safe. The device user cannot log into your company's cloud apps. They've got to fix the problem on their end. But here's the nice part. They fix it. I'll give you an example. A device is blocked because the employee doesn't have an up-to-date browser. What are you running version 89 of Chrome on there for? So what Collide does is say, hey, let's update that browser so you'll be compliant so you can log in, and the end user remediates the problem. This is how you get your fleet to 100% compliance without overwhelming your IT team. Plus, now you got the user on your side. They understand what's going on, why it's important, and they're thinking. They're saying, oh, yeah, I want to make sure everything's up to date and secure. Without Collide, IT teams really don't have a way to solve these compliance issues. And this is the problem, or stop insecure devices from logging in. With Collide, you can set and enforce compliance across your entire fleet. Oh, yes, Collide is completely cross-platform, Mac, Windows, and Linux. So your entire fleet. Collide's unique. It makes device compliance part of the authentication process. So the user's logging in, they're using Okta, doing everything right. Then Collide will alert them if there are compliance issues and say, stop, you've got to fix this. It prevents them from logging in. It's security you could feel good about because Collide puts transparency and respect for users at the center of their product. Users will appreciate it and will become part of the team. To sum it up, Collide's method means fewer support tickets, less frustration for your users, most importantly, 100% fleet compliance. Visit collide.com/WW and learn more. You could book a demo, KOLIDE, collide.com/WW. Thank you, Collide, for supporting us. We really love Collide. And thank you, Windows dozers and winners, for using that address, because I want them to know you saw it here. That helps us. Collide.com/WW. Get that demo today. All right, back of the book. That means it's time to start off things with a tip from Paul Thurrott.
Hey, by the way, this just in. Amazon is shutting down their Halo branded health and fitness products and services.
Huh?
Yeah.
I have a Halo. Never mind.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Sorry.
That was the bracelet that you would wear that didn't have an interface.
Well, they eventually shipped one that did have a screen too, but yeah, it started.
And
out
you
as
had to pay a monthly fee for, which is why probably nobody wanted it.
Yeah, what no one really wanted was to use your camera to take a picture of your fat, ugly body so you can upload it to Amazon.
That was a different one. I have that too. That was the fashion one.
It's awful.
Also discontinued.
Yep.
But Amazon now has every picture of my fat, ugly body. So there's that.
Yeah, no, me too. We're both there together. So, okay.
Oh, that's right. Halo did do that at the beginning, didn't it?
Yep.
To measure your fitness.
I think BMI and
to mock you, frankly.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
They're like, no, we wanted you to take a picture of you, not an elephant.
What's that?
Thanks.
What's
thanks,
that
Amazon.
thing?
That can't be you. Do you have
I
a clearer
forgot.
picture?
That's
Yeah,
right.
It was not good. It was not good. It was a little,
Oh.
alarming.
You and I, the things we do for our craft.
I know. The other thing, by the way, anger detection. I had to turn that thing off.
Oh, yeah, I bet. It did. It said, you were yelling at 3 a.m. Was there anything you want to talk
really
about?
upset about something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at work.
I remember Stacey Higginbotham, I think she sent me her Halo because she refused to pose naked in front of it, which is completely understandable. I, however, and apparently Paul.
Yeah, no, to test it fully, you had to.
Got to do it.
Sure.
It's our job.
Yep.
Oh, well. All right, there's an
With
update.
that little
no
bit
more
of
Halo.
awkwardness out of the way.
Speaking of bulk.
Yep. So, yeah, people coming at this from Linux or, Linux, I guess I have the Mac too, I suppose, are probably familiar with the notion of package managers. This is a little less common in the Microsoft space. We have them, of course. Chocolatey
and so forth. Chocolatey.
But it's not it's never been a built-in function of Windows until fairly recently, right? So we actually have something called the Windows Package Manager, which is a command line tool called WinGet, which is, by the way, freaking awesome. And I'm probably going to have more tips about this because I've been writing about this for the book. You can use it for lots and lots of different things, but I want to stick to one use case for today. And that is this notion of bulk installing apps on a computer. So for example, you bring up a computer for the first time, which granted is something I do a lot, but other people do sometimes, of course. Maybe you bought a new computer or you use PC reset or reset your PC and reset it. So now thing comes up, clean desktop, you got to get going, right? So there's a bunch of things you have to do. You have to configure some settings in the system. You have to install a bunch of applications. In my case, I sync a certain portion of OneDrive, right? So that's on all the computers I use. And, some of this is time consuming. And one of the more time consuming bits is that installing of apps. So you can use WinGet, among other things, to install and keep apps up to date, right? The interesting thing is because it's a command line, you can create a script that will do this thing in bulk, right? That's probably beyond this. It's not the type of thing most people do, sit there and go to figure out the exact command lines. However, there are graphical tools, including one that was written by Mehdi Hassan, who used to write for Thread.com. If you go to it's called Winstall. And Winstall is winstall.app is the URL. Go there in a web browser. And what you do is search for the apps that you want to install. So I searched for all the apps I install on every single PC. It created a script, which I can then run on a computer. So I bring the thing up, run terminal, paste the script in, run the thing, command lines, installs everything, done. And it's nice because it's all automated. It's all automated, unattended installs by default. You can change that if you want. Obviously, you still have to go and sign into the apps and do all that kind of stuff. But this actually speeds up the process pretty dramatically. So it's kind of a neat use for this thing. So that's one thing. I'm going to talk about WinGet more in the future.
I will give Richard a plug for this because episode 793 of Run As Radio had an interview with Sarah Lean, right?
Yep.
The product manager for WinGet.
Not to be confused with Sarah Lane.
Not Sarah Lane, Sarah Lean.
But
you couldn't be more lean than Sarah Lane, so I'm confused.
I know Sarah Lean looks pretty lean. Anyway, the point is,
that's what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah. So WinGet. So this is going to be a chapter in the book. I have to figure out if I'm going to put this in the app section or the command line section, but that's a problem for a different day. Anyway, I've been writing it. I'm fascinated by WinGet. It's really, really a neat tool. And then the app update. The app pick may surprise you a little bit. It will not surprise you to know that I use the Microsoft Authenticator app to handle second factor authentication requests on my phone, right? I assume, Richard, you do too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good one. It's good. It works well. However, Google, which has been kind of behind a bit on this type of functionality, just released an update to Google Authenticator that adds a feature that the Microsoft Authenticator app does not have. And for people like me who move between different devices, this is actually super useful. What it does is it syncs all of your second factor codes, all of the accounts you have configured in the app, to the cloud, so that when you use this app on
Wait
a
a minute.
different device,
It
that
didn't
stuff's
used to
just
do
all
that?
there.
This is new?
No, right? No, you had to set. So think about how the process of like how this works, right? So you have an iPhone in my case, maybe, and you're like, okay, I need to go to my Microsoft account, my Microsoft 365 account, Bitwar, whatever the things I have, all those accounts, and you kind of laboriously, one at a time, put them all in, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to switch to the like an Android phone now. Yeah, I'm going to use that instead. You have to do that like all over again.
Yeah, and this
in
is
some
something you and
cases-
I do a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of a problem. So what the Microsoft Authenticator app has, which is useful, is the ability to back up those things to the cloud. So you can back up your accounts, I guess I'm going to call it. But you can't seamlessly kind of switch between different devices. If you add an account on one machine, it's still just on that machine. You can back it up and then you can restore it, but it's not just like the seamless account based thing. So I haven't gotten this Google account, Google Authenticator app update yet, but I'm intrigued by this. And to me, like this is one of those things that it's like, wait, this doesn't do this. Like it seems like something it should just do.
Every authenticator should at least do that.
Well, they're probably. I mean, there are security concerns here, I guess.
Yeah, well, because you're giving somebody else those keys. And by the way, they're saying in the Discord that it's not end-to-end encrypted.
Yeah, right.
That's not a good thing if it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, but the point of this. Okay. So again, I'm not. They just announced this. So
we'll research this. We will research.
Yeah, this is very interesting. This is something that's the way I play. The way I basically describe this is, I use Microsoft Authenticator. I'm definitely going to take a look at this. I'm curious about this, and I'd really like to see Microsoft do this as well. Because a lot of people do use Google for password management. They're signing into automatically in apps and on the web, right, on devices, Android phones and so forth. They work with all the FIDO stuff. They do all that stuff. So this is like one of those. Depending on your where you have your things, right? I use the Microsoft stuff, but this seems like a good idea to me. And this has been one of my issues. I like to move between devices. Like I use a lot of different computers. That's one thing, but one of the challenges to switching between phones is T-Mobile, actually. But one of the other ones is this thing, because you don't want to lose. You don't want to be out in the world and have to authenticate in a banking app or PayPal or whatever it is, and then you look at your phone, you're like, oh, it's on the other phone.
Yeah.
Like you want that stuff to be with you. So it's just something to know about. It's an interesting idea. And if that's not Windows enough for you guys, first of all, screw you. But secondly, Rufus, the USB make a Windows install, key, Windows USB key.
Bootable USB key. Yeah.
Yep, is just upgraded to version 4. By the way, bunch of fixes in there. They dropped support, I think, for Windows 7, or was that? Yeah, I think it's the first one. Yeah, I think so. They dropped support for Windows 7, but there is a new version of that. I haven't written that one up yet, but you can look at that as well.
It's out of support.
Richard Campbell, host
Yes,
of the fabulous Run As Radio and .NET Rocks. You got something coming up on Run As? You want to
Published today. This is the show, one of the shows I did in Wales. Remember when we streamed from there? And this was a panel discussion I did with several of the speakers from the SQL Bits conference, talking about building data analytics teams. It was this sort of recognition that you just can't hire people in this space these days. There's just so much demand. If you can fake the word data scientist into your resume somehow, you're buried in work. And so I rounded up some folks that are serious in the space that had a lot of experience. Just for fun, we had one of them remote. They were in New Zealand. So Anupama came in from New Zealand. Falek and Maria were all together in the room, and just walk through this idea of how you would grow out a team, the different roles that need to be filled, and what kind of upskilling can be done, what services are needed. And how you can really start taking advantage of the data your organization has.
And now it's Suntory time.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to get through this by the top of the hour, but let's try.
You got 14 minutes, dude.
Good luck.
I know Yamazaki. I think everybody knows that as being kind of the classic Japanese whiskey.
Let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
The original Japanese alcohol is Japanese rice wine, sake.
Yeah.
It goes back thousands of years, made from rice. They polish the rice to take the bran off. They brew it sort of like beer, but not really, because they use a fungus, Aspergillus oryzae. Now, sounds bad, but that's also how they make miso, how they make soy sauce. Like, this is an edible fungus that releases amylases to convert the rice starches into maltose and glucose. And then remember, all booze making is take a starch, make it into sugar, ferment it into alcohol, happiness, right? And typically, the sake process is kind of unified. It's a simple, straightforward process. It comes out about 18% alcohol. They typically lower it to 15%, although they occasionally do distill it to make another product called shochu.
Which I have and love. Yes.
Yeah, great stuff. And that's a low, it's not a typical spirit either. They're typically 25 to 30% alcohol rather than the 40 plus, which is normal for spirits. So how did Japan get into whiskey? Well, back in the 17th century, they weren't into whiskey. They were a closed up country. They had their challenges with the Opium Wars and so forth, until a fellow by the name of Matthew Perry, no relation to Chander, who was a Commodore in the U.S.
Commodore
Navy,
Perry. Oh, yes.
Yes. Showed up in 1853 with a gunship and said, let's trade right now. And so he brought whiskey with him at the time. And
of course he did.
Well-to-do liked it. And so by the 1860s, you start to see Western-style bars opening in Japan. The earliest records I could find was one from 1871. And, of course, there's translation problems here. So there was a record of importing whiskey from Ireland called cat whiskey, which is probably Burke's because it has a cat on the label from that era, and whiskey from Scotland, which they called deer whiskey, which is probably Dalmore, because even in the 1870s, they had the stag on the bottle. But the learning of whiskey making for Japanese starts with a guy named Masataka Takasuru, who in 1918 goes to Scotland. Now, he was from a family of sake makers, and they paid to send him off to school there. He actually studied at the Glasgow University, studying chemistry with a focus on whiskey. He also came to study under Joseph A. Nettleton.
That's funny, because that was my minor as well. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Chinese history with a focus on whiskey. I'm
still studying.
Yeah,
all the time. And he interned at Longmore and Bowness and Hazelburn. And then he married a Scottish lady in 1919, which apparently upset all the families. Her name was Rita. And so, but she realized that he really wanted to bring whiskey to Japan. So she went to Japan, and her story is actually kind of cool. If you ever get a chance to tour the Nikkei distillery, their house and stuff is still there. She was all in. So in 1920, Takasura gets back to Japan. Now he's a guy with big ideas and no money. So he falls in with a fellow by the name of Shinjiro Tori. And at this point, this guy's already a very successful chemist, which at the time you bought alcohol from a chemist. He had a bunch of other lines of business. And the company was called Suntory, as a play on Tori-san.
Oh, how funny. I did not know that. That's great.
And his original successful alcohol product was actually importing Portuguese wine, which the Japanese market found was too bitter. So he would sweeten it and rebottle it, and called it Akadama wine, which you can still buy today. But in 1907, it was 60% of the wine market in Japan. So this guy was doing well. And now he gets to know Takasuru. They make a deal. And in 1923, they established the very first whiskey distillery in Japan, which is Yamazaki. And it's still there today. It's between Kyoto and Osaka. That doesn't mean they're able to make whiskey. They struggle for many years to try and make a drinkable whiskey. Takasura even went back to Scotland at one point to figure out what he was doing wrong. Their first production whiskey comes 6 years later. It's called Shirafoda, which is Japanese for white label, and people generally don't like it. So they are trying to incorporate more Japanese styles and flavors into it. And one of the challenges they have is that they are trying to use local oak because Japan does have an oak tree. Quercus crispula, also known as the water oak or Mizunara oak. Now, this, if you ever get a picture of one of these trees, you'll see it's quite twisty. They're not great for making barrels with. Initially, they were using 200-year-old plus trees, although the current cooperages use 100-year-old trees. It doesn't grow straight. It's prone to leaking, and they typically grow better in the far north. But otherwise, the barrel making process is more or less the same. They char their insides much the same way, although they typically have to do leak testing because of the twists in the wood. And so they will assemble a whole barrel, fill it with water, judge how it's leaking, even swap out some staves and refit it. Also, when they initially started aging in Mizunara oak, they found it tasted bad, which is, unfortunately, Takasura is learning from the Scottish method. And the Scottish method showed that every few years you would take a taste, and over time the wood flavors would emerge. And what he found with Mizunara oak was that it was very strong right away. And so the presumption it would keep getting stronger, although they later discovered that if you gave it 15 or 20 years, it actually mellowed out and became very tasty, to the point where today there are Scottish whiskeys that buy a certain number of Mizunara barrels for aging. Chivas Regal makes one.
It's a long time to wait.
It's a long time. And again, you mix barrels around, but it has distinct flavors that are unique to the wood, and so it does get around. It's interesting to see that today, a lot of distilleries have been built in much later times. They actually are started making washbacks, the big barrels for doing sugar extraction out of Mizunara oak. So after 10 years of effort, Takasura finishes his 10-year contract with Suntory and he leaves. Now, Tori's not unhappy to have him go because he's making all this money on red wine. He's trying to spend it on, and he's ending up spending on a whiskey, and they're not getting good results. And Takasura had been pretty adamant that they really needed to be in better terroir, like in the right locations that were more like Scotland. And that's in the far north of Japan, in Hokkaido. And here they were down in Osaka, which is not a good location for it. As far as Takasura was concerned, Tori wasn't too worried about that. So in 1934, Takasura establishes the Nikkei distillery in Hokkaido, and starts making more whiskey. So now that you've got competitors, you've got Suntory and you've got Nikkei. They had small funding, so they're trying to make whiskey. Suntory gets their first hit in 1937. So now we're coming into World War II, and they make a blended whiskey they just call Suntory whiskey. But it looks very much like your sort of traditional blended whiskey. It's popular with the soldiers. Demand grows as the war ends. The Americans like it as they've gone control of Japan at the end of the war. Suntory grows massively, diversifies. They make all kinds of product. In fact, today, only a third of their products are alcohol related. They make a lot of canned beverages and other things. So post World War II, whiskey's hip for the 60s to the 70s, and then it fades. As the economic crisis that would eventually grab Japan in the late 80s, early 90s, expensive drinks become less popular, cheap drinks become more popular, and so the Japanese market for whiskey kind of declines. Suntory responds to that by starting to make competition-grade whiskeys, and this is the one you've heard of, which is the Yamazaki 12-year-old. Yamazaki, this was a totally traditional whiskey. They did everything the way the Scots did. Pure barley, pot stilled, barrel aged. They used a blend of bourbon and sherry casks as well as the Japanese oak. If you can find a bottle of this stuff today, which is tough, you're talking $300-400 for a 12-year-old. I mean, it's good, but it ain't that good. I should also point out that the Nikkei distillery, the sort of rival distillery from the two original partners in the 30s splitting up, they won awards even before that one. I mean, Yamazaki was a gold medal, but the Nikkei's Yoshi, which is the location of the distillery, won an award in 2001. So interesting that when Yamazaki gets their hit in 2003, that's the same year that Lost in Translation comes out. And that's when you get make it Suntory time, as Leo's been happily quoting all along. And and it works. The demand worldwide for Suntory whiskey goes through the roof. And
it's the Bill Murray effect.
Yes. Suntory diversifies. Then they make a blended whiskey called Hibiki Harmony, which also wins a ton of awards. And it's considered one of the best blended whiskey ever. And by the 2010s, in 2015, Suntory goes on a buying spree. They buy Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, Booker's, Baker's, Basil Hayden, Knob Creek. In Scotland, they bought Bowmore, Lefroy, Ardbeg, Glengarry, Auchentoshan. They own Canadian Club. And in Ireland, Connemara and Kilbeggan. So they're huge, multinational. They own stuff of all over the place.
They have to be one of the biggest.
We're one of the biggest. They compete with Diageo. And of course, again, only a third of the revenue from alcoholic beverages. They make money from a lot of different places.
It's incredible.
Nikkei has won awards too. Their original big award back in 2001, but they won in 2015 with their Nikkei whiskey from the barrel. They started experimenting. Takasura loved the coffee still. We talked about this in the distillation, which is the continuous running still. So they still use the stills that he installed in the 1960s to make both their coffee malt and coffee grain. The grain is corn aged in bourbon cask. The malt is made from barley. Although to balance the flavor in it, Nikkei had bought in Ben Nevis. I mentioned this in an earlier show, and they were putting a little Ben Nevis in it, which brought up a bit of a scandal as whiskey was making a return in Japan. This idea that both Suntory, the biggest, was adding Bowmore to some of their and calling it Japanese whiskey, and Nikkei was adding a bit of Ben Nevis to their so-called Japanese whiskey. And so many other, as those guys had all that success in the early aughts and now into the teens, many other distilleries have opened in Japan to make whiskey. But you always get into this battle of what is whiskey and what does it really mean? So now they're finally, as of 2021, they created a set of rules. It's for the Japan Spirits and Liquors Makers Association. Of course, Nikkei and Suntory directly involved in this. And the rules are: the spirit must be fermented, distilled, and aged in a distillery in Japan. It must contain malted grain, but it can contain other grains. It must use water from Japan. It must spend at least 3 years in wooden casks. It can't be distilled higher than 95%, which is incredibly high. That's vodka levels. Can't be diluted below 40% for the standard for a spirit. It has to be bottled in Japan. And if it doesn't follow any, if it misses out on any of these rules, not only can it not be called Japanese whiskey, it can't have any Japanese symbology in it. It can't use the flag. It can't use city names. It can't use Japanese graphics. Literally, they're
is Hibiki a location in Japan? Is that where that comes from?
Hibiki means harmony.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's a blended. It's their blended whiskey where they combine all these things to get to a blended flavor. Okay. And with the little time we have left, let me reference the whiskey that I've chosen here, which is Oishi, the whiskey sherry cask. Now, this is a newer distillery, only opened in the 2000s, but they are doing, if we talk about what is whiskey is fundamentally a grain converted to sugars, fermented into alcohol, distilled to a certain level, and aged in barrels. Oishi is actually made from rice. They use the sake method. But then they distill it up to a high distillation level, and then they age it in first fill sherry casks.
I guess it doesn't matter what it comes from, right?
Exactly.
It's just alcohol.
And it scores for the Whiskey Observer scored it 92 out of 100.
Wow.
Like that.
And this is only 8-year-old too. This is not.
It's got no age statement on it, which means it's less than 8.
Less than 8.
Yeah. It's below. Yeah.
I gotta find this.
This you can find. It's
is it good?
I
like it?
It's
you're
delicious.
Recommending it. Yeah. Wow.
I'm absolutely. Now, again, for a no age statement whiskey, $80 is a lot of money to spend on a whiskey.
Yeah, that's pricey. Yeah.
Right. Or $70.
As long as you understand what it, but as you said.
And it's a rice whiskey, which is hysterical.
Well, we get all the way back to the Japanese learning how to make whiskey like Scotch. So are you making Scottish whiskey in Japan?
Right.
Or is it just the barrel? Because you're using pot stills from Scotland.
I would argue it is the most Japanese of Japanese whiskeys.
Yeah.
That's what I think too. Although
Yeah.
with the new rules as of 2021, you can't call this Japanese whiskey.
Yeah, right.
But it
There's
does have a
no-
Japanese character on it.
Well, what
It
do they
does
call
It
it?
now.
says
They-
distilled in Japan, so they must have changed the rules a little bit.
Well, no, the packaging rules don't come in full force till next year.
Oh,
2024.
so they're going to have to change it.
They're going to have to change it. All right. Or there's going to be tweaks of rules, or they're going to add. The only real thing they're not complying with right now is having a little malted grain in it. So instead of, if you just added a certain
Just a
percentage
little
of
bit
malted
would
grain
do it. Oh, okay.
to be compliant.
Okay.
But I would say this is the most Japanese whiskey.
Right,
It is
and
made
that
with
they-
Japanese tactics.
They should make a case for changing the rules.
Well, and of course, who's fighting for these new rules?
Suntory
The-
Time.
The incumbents, exactly. The ones
It's a
that got into
classic
trouble
antitrust problem. Damn those companies.
Oh,
in a
Hishi.
Japanese form.
OHISHI. If you can find it, $80
Yep.
thereabouts.
It's easier to find Hibiki Harmony, and it's about, again, $80 for a blend is outrageously expensive, but Japanese whiskey tends to be expensive.
Yeah.
Very tasty. One world's best blended whiskey for many years in a row.
Nice.
It's a classic Suntory. You can't go wrong. I wouldn't bother trying to hunt down Yamazaki 12. You make yourself crazy.
Somebody gave me a
Right.
bottle, and I think I still have it. So I'm now going to treat it with the
It's
respect
very
it
special.
deserves. Yeah.
I think it's time to do an in-studio show. You know what I'm saying?
There you go. I seem to remember that happened a few years ago.
Yeah, quite a few years ago.
And then some
Yeah.
Abelor got in, Abunda got involved.
Might
and
have
then
been
there was some
involved
trouble.
as well. Yes, there was trouble for sure. And Mary Jo was really the instigator. And since she's not here to defend herself, we're sticking with that story.
That's right.
Mr. Richard Campbell, runasradio.com, .net rocks. Rich Campbell on Twitter. Thank you for that enlightening conversation. Every time you do this, it makes me want to drink.
I am going to drink. I'll just lay it on the table.
Last week's show, I referenced Woodford Reserve is a very unusual American bourbon. And shortly after that, I got a picture from Paul saying, I blame you.
And you know,
True.
you might not know this, but hot dogs and whiskey, excellent pairing. Excellent.
I also, you know, I meant to text Richard a second time to tell you something my wife told me, which was that we often will buy like a cheaper, like a Canadian Club, something, whatever, for cocktails and stuff. But when you put a good whiskey, a bourbon into a cocktail,
yeah,
it makes a difference.
Yeah, you can tell the difference for sure.
You're an expensive.
Oh, that's
habit.
interesting.
Oh, no,
So
very
don't-
much so.
Don't use cheap whiskeys, in other
Well,
words.
no. First of all,
Use
you
good
can save a lot of
ingredients.
money.
Yeah.
What you don't do is do a side-by-side taste test, because then you'll find yourself spending 3 times as much, because a good bourbon whiskey will.
Well, especially with an old fashioned or something like that, where whiskey is the predominant.
You can tell the difference between a $20 bottle and a $70 bottle in a cocktail.
You can use anything you want in a
$400
Long Island
bottle.
iced tea, but in an old fashioned, maybe you should use good whiskey.
A little bit nicer.
100%,
Will make
yeah.
sense. But
it's a huge
there's
problem.
it gets up to a point where it's like, are you really putting mixer in that $400 bottle of whiskey?
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
you
Why not just
shouldn't do
drink
that.
it straight and save the
Do
middleman? Yeah.
There's always a line, you know.
Yeah.
But a more expensive whiskey bourbon makes a difference, no doubt about it.
Nice to know.
Absolutely. And I am an expensive habit. I found in general my relationship with spouses goes one of two ways. It's either stay away from that guy, he costs us a lot of money.
right. Or we need to see him more. Yeah.
Or
Exactly.
don't buy anything till you talk to him because he gets us the good stuff.
Yeah.
That's what Lisa tells me. Yes. So I have a good spouse. Hey, thank you, Richard. Paul Thurrott is at thurrott.com, THURROTT.com. His book, The Field Guide to Windows 11, is at leanpub.com, as is his newest book. Remind me, what is it again?
Windows everywhere.
Windows Everywhere. But not everywhere. Leanpub.com is actually where it is.
It's also on Amazon now, by the way.
Oh, well, it is everywhere. All right. Nice. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Richard. We do Windows Weekly every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. I tell you those times because you can watch live at live.twit.tv, chat live at irc.twit.tv, or in the Club Twit Discord. Club Twit, got to join it. Just got to say that. Paul does a great show called Hands on Windows, which is club only. There's Hands on Macintosh. There's all sorts of great stuff. And the new Home Theater Geek show with Scott Wilkinson just emerging into the club as well. Twit.tv/clubtwit, $7 a month. Ad-free versions of all the shows, the Discord, and great programming. But no whiskey. Sorry. No, that's all on you. We're not allowed to sell whiskey, which is probably a good thing. Yet. After the fact, you can get the show at twit.tv/WW. When you get to that webpage, you'll also see a link to a YouTube page. That's the show dedicated YouTube page. So that's another thing to know about if you want to share a clip or you just like watching the video. That's a place you can do that. I would say the best thing to do would be subscribe. We have links to the major podcast players, but it'll work on any podcast player. Just look for Windows Weekly. That way you'll get it automatically the minute it's available. Paul, Richard, have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
And we'll
back.
see you next time on Windows Weekly. And I have only one thing to say now.
For relaxing times, make it Suntory Time.
If you love all things Android, well, I've got a show for you to check out. It's called All About Android, and I'll give you 3 guesses what we talk about. We talk about Android, the latest news, hardware, apps. We answer feedback. It's me, Jason Howell, Ron Richards, Wintwit Dow, and a whole cast of awesome characters talking about the operating system that we love. You can find All About Android at twit.tv/AAA.